19 years ago, I was a 16-year-old girl, standing at 5'7" and weighing about 130 pounds. I like to think I was strong for my age, but I knew I'd be no match for two young men. My story begins when my mother and stepfather left for a vacation, leaving me and my 17-year-old sister home alone. This wasn't unusual. My parents weren't exactly winning any awards for their parenting skills. My sister and I didn't get along at all. She was spiteful and mean, a real piece of work. Thankfully, she decided to stay at a friend's house while our parents were away, leaving me alone in the house. I was nervous about being on my own, so I asked my boyfriend, Brett, to stay with me. He was a hot-headed guy, always ready for a fight, but I was glad to have him there. Brett and I were at my house, just starting to mess around in my basement bedroom, when a loud knock at the front door interrupted us. My room was in the basement, but from the landing area where the staircase splits with a small platform before turning, I could see a window that looked out onto the steps leading up to the alcove of our front porch. Peering out, I saw two figures standing there. Just as I tried to get a better look, one of them spotted me. My breath caught in my chest. It was almost midnight, and two young men I didn't recognize were on my porch. I had no idea who they were or what they wanted. The guy who saw me nudged his friend, and they both peered through the window, calling out for me to come to the door. Meanwhile, Brett had already started upstairs to open it. I panicked, hissing at him not to, but he ignored me. Brett was the kind of guy who thought he was tougher than everyone else, always ready to prove he could take on anyone. By the time I reached the door, he was already yelling at the guys to leave. They saw me and, to my shock, called me by name, asking me to let them in. Brett told them to get lost, his voice sharp with bravado. One of the guys, I think he said his name was Lars or something close, spoke directly to Brett, saying, "Come outside, we just want to talk." I shook my head, my voice trembling as I said, "No thanks, we're going to bed now," and slammed the door shut. Confusion and fear churned in my stomach. Who were these guys? How did they know my name? They lingered on the doorstep, knocking again after a few minutes. Through the door, Lars, or whatever his name was, claimed he was a friend of my sister's. He said she told him I was home alone and suggested they stop by. Knowing my sister's cruel streak, I believed him. She was exactly the type to pull something like this. But I wasn't foolish enough to open the door. I shouted for them to leave, my voice shaking. That's when things escalated. The guy started kicking the door, each thud making it rattle in its frame. I was terrified it wouldn't hold. My heart pounded as I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the phone, and dialed the police. The dispatcher assured me help was on the way and told me to lock all the doors and stay on the line. Brett, still at the door, kept yelling at them, which only seemed to make them angrier. I begged him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. While I rushed upstairs to check the windows and lock every door, Brett went down to the basement to secure the mudroom. That room had a heavy wooden door, built from thick 2x4 planks like something you'd see on a barn. It was sturdy, with a big spring-loaded bolt and a wooden plank that could be set across it like a barricade. But even that didn't feel safe enough. I could hear one of the guys pounding on it while shouting to his friend to try the back door. The back door was a flimsy thing, a 1960s relic with a small square window at face level, covered by a thin curtain. I was desperately trying to wedge a chair under the knob when I looked up and saw the second guy staring at me through the glass. I screamed, my voice barely audible as the dispatcher asked if I was okay. One of them's looking at me through the window. I whispered, my throat tight. He was older than me, maybe 20 tall, with dark eyes that seemed to bore into me. His face held a creepy, calm smile that sent chills down my spine. I'd never seen him before, but he knew my name. Tapping the window with one finger, never breaking eye contact, he said, "Becky, let me in." I couldn't breathe. The knob rattled as he tugged at it. "Let me in, Becky," he repeated, his voice soft but insistent. "I just want to make sure you're okay. I just want to talk." I pressed myself against the fridge, 3 feet from him, frozen. Then his demeanor changed. His calm facade shattered as he started pounding on the door, screaming, "Let me in this damn house. If I have to break in, I'll kill you both." His face twisted into something manic, his eyes wild with rage. I thought I was going to pass out. Suddenly, a loud knock came from the front door, and he froze. His expression shifted to a hateful sneer before he bolted, running down the back stairs and disappearing into the woods behind our yard. Brett had gone to the front door. It was the police. 2 female officers stood there, and I nearly collapsed with relief. Tears streamed down my face as I told them the men had fled into the woods. The woods weren't deep. They ran along the bank of a large river, with a bridge just up the road where the trees met the street. One officer stayed to take my statement while the other ran around back to investigate. She returned, speaking quickly to her partner, saying she'd seen the men running across the bridge. Both officers jumped into their cruiser and sped off in pursuit. Still shaking, I went to the kitchen to make tea, my mind racing. I was furious at Brett for egging them on and my sister for whatever role she played in this. My anger, fear, and adrenaline mixed into a volatile cocktail. I could have torn her apart if she'd been there. 20 minutes later, the cruiser returned. In the back seat were the 2 men. The officers asked me to confirm their identities. Peering through the window, I saw them, still terrifying even in handcuffs. The one who'd stared at me through the back door wouldn't meet my eyes. I confirmed it was them and gave the police the full story, including my sister's alleged involvement. One officer muttered something about my sister being awful, and I couldn't help but agree. I pressed charges for attempted forcible entry, property damage. They'd broken a living room window, trespassing, disorderly conduct, and attempted assault. At first, both men pleaded not guilty, but they later admitted to some of the charges. They were sentenced to 18 months in jail and ordered to stay at least 500 meters away from me and Brett at all times, with no contact allowed. When I confronted my sister, she laughed it off and denied everything, as expected. She was a terrible person. I never found out what those men really wanted. They claimed they just wanted to talk, but I'm grateful I didn't have to find out the hard way. I'm a 15-year-old girl, 5'5", and not particularly strong. During the summer, I took a job babysitting for my dad's coworker, watching their 3-year-old son, Timmy. He was an easy kid to look after, well-mannered for his age, never fussy, and always cheerful. At $50 a night, it was an offer I couldn't refuse. When the night of the babysitting job arrived, I showed up 10 minutes early at their house, just half a block from my own. I met Timmy's parents, Megan and Charlie, and asked about allergies or any special instructions for Timmy. They told me I'd be staying the night, which was fine since my house was so close. If anything went wrong, I could easily take Timmy there. After Megan and Charlie left, the day passed uneventfully. I spent most of it outside, watching Timmy play with his toy trucks in the yard while their massive German Shepherd, Jax, lounged nearby. Jax was a gentle giant, a total sweetheart, and Timmy adored him. Everything was fine until supper time. I had just sat Timmy down at the kitchen table with his dinner when a loud knock came at the front door. I didn't think much of it at first and went to answer. Standing there was a scruffy-looking young man, no older than 25, with an unkempt appearance that immediately put me on edge. "Hey, I lost my phone. Can I use yours?" he said, his tone casual but carrying an odd vibe that made my skin prickle. I kept the screen door locked between us, my hand resting on the main door, ready to slam it shut. "Oh, sorry, my phone's dead." I lied, my voice steady despite the unease creeping up my spine. He tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Okay, well, how about you charge your phone, and I can just wait inside?" His insistence sent a jolt of alarm through me. He was too eager to get into the house, and every instinct screamed at me to keep him out. "No, just go, please," I said firmly, closing the door and locking it before he could say another word. I turned back to Timmy, who was happily finishing his meal, oblivious to the interaction. After cleaning up the dishes and getting Timmy dressed for bed, we settled in the living room. I let him watch some kid shows on TV, which meant enduring an hour and a half of colorful cartoons. I plugged my phone into its charger and played a game on it, something simple that didn't demand too much attention so I could keep an eye on Timmy. As evening turned to night, I tucked him into bed and went back downstairs to eat my own dinner on the couch. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the TV I'd left on low. Then, out of nowhere, Jack started barking furiously from the backyard, his deep growls mixed with a high-pitched whine. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth, as I heard the shed door slam shut with a loud bang. Panic surged through me. I rushed to the living room window and peered out, my heart racing. In the dim light, I saw the same man from earlier storming across the yard toward the house. The back doors were glass, and I thank God I'd lowered the blinds earlier, giving me a few precious seconds to think. I sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed a knife from the knife block, and raced upstairs to Timmy's room. He was awake, sitting up in bed, his small voice trembling as he asked, "Is Jax okay?" I forced a smile, trying to keep my own fear in check. "We're going to play a game, okay? Hide and seek. You have to be super quiet." Timmy, always obedient, nodded eagerly. I carried him to the bathroom, opened a small closet that was easy to miss unless you knew it was there, and gently placed him inside. "Stay here and don't make a sound," I whispered, closing the door. He didn't protest, trusting me completely. Creeping back downstairs, I heard the back door creak open, followed by the sound of 2 sets of footsteps moving quickly through the first floor. I caught snippets of their low voices, planning who would search where. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I pulled out my phone, my hand shaking as I dialed 911. "This is 911. What's your emergency?" The operator's voice came through, a lifeline in the chaos. "I'm babysitting, and there are 2 men in the house. Please help," I whispered, clutching the knife tightly as I pressed myself into a corner of the hallway. "What's your address?" the operator asked. I rattled off the address, my eyes darting upward as a shadow loomed at the top of the stairs. It was the first man, the one from the door, towering over me with a wide, menacing grin. I screamed, shoving him with all my strength, not daring to use the knife. I bolted down the stairs, knowing he'd follow me and hoping it would keep him away from Timmy. As I ran past the second man in the living room, I yelled, "Why are you guys here?" My voice cracked with fear and defiance. My phone, still connected to the operator, was stuffed in my back pocket, and I prayed they could hear everything. The second man didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out a machete, its blade glinting in the dim light. They cornered me in the kitchen, the first man blocking one exit, the second slowly advancing with a machete. My back pressed against the counter, the knife in my hand trembling as I braced for the worst. Just as I thought it was over, the front door burst open, and police officers stormed in, guns drawn. The men tried to run, but the officers were faster, tackling them to the ground. I collapsed against the counter, gasping for air. One of the officers approached, asking if I was okay and where Timmy was. "I'm fine," I managed, leading them upstairs to the bathroom closet. Timmy was still there, safe and quiet. I scooped him up, and the officer guided us outside. Jax, still on edge, stayed glued to our side, growling at the police until I calmed him down. My dad, Megan, and Charlie arrived soon after, their faces pale with panic. They hugged Timmy and me, asking over and over if we were okay. Timmy, blissfully unaware of the danger, proudly declared that he'd won our game of hide and seek. Explaining that to his parents wasn't easy. The police found the man from the shed, who'd been hiding there earlier. I later learned the 2 men had been watching the house, waiting for a chance to break in. Ever since that night, I haven't been able to babysit for that family without feeling a surge of panic whenever Jax barks. The memory of those men, their footsteps, and that machete still haunts me. Growing up, I always had an uneasy relationship with my closet. It was a cramped space, maybe 6 feet by 4, with no door to seal it off. The doorway was so narrow that stepping inside felt suffocating, especially for someone like me with asthma. Every sound I made in that empty closet echoed strangely, bouncing off the walls in a way that made the air feel heavy and oppressive. The tight space seemed to choke the breath out of me, and I avoided it whenever I could. When I was about 6, my aunt gave me a play set of small, intricately detailed plastic horses. Like any 6-year-old girl, I was obsessed with them. My favorite was a striking black and white pinto horse I named Sasha. She had a strong, proud look, and I thought a fierce name like Sasha suited her perfectly. I'd spend hours playing with her and the other horses, imagining grand adventures. One day, after a long play session, I carefully placed Sasha and the others into a toy bin and slid it onto a shelf in that dreaded closet. I was small, too short to notice a book lying flat beneath the bin, creating an uneven slope. About 20 seconds after I walked away, I heard a crash. The bin had slipped off the book, spilling my beloved horses across the floor. One by one, I picked them up, placing them back in their home, but Sasha was nowhere to be found. I searched frantically, tears streaming down my face, but she was gone. After hours of crying, I tucked her memory away in my mind, resigned to her loss. 2 years later, I was around 8, and it was summer. I loved playing badminton in the front yard with my mom just before sunset, when the sun was low enough not to blind us. One evening, she agreed to a match, so I dashed to the hallway closet where we kept our sports gear. I rummaged through the cluttered shelves, grabbing my racket and a few birdies, but I couldn't find Mom's racket or an extra birdie. Digging deeper, my fingers brushed against something smooth and plastic buried among the odds and ends. My heart skipped as I pulled it out. It was Sasha, my long-lost horse, inexplicably tucked away in a closet where she hadn't been lost. I stood there stunned, holding her familiar black and white form, wondering how she'd ended up in a place I hadn't even looked 2 years ago. Fast forward 5 years, and I was 13. For my birthday, I begged for a loft bed, and to my delight, my parents surprised me with one. I set it up so that when I lay in bed, I'd be facing my closet, its open doorway staring back at me like a dark, unblinking eye. By this time, I'd mostly forgotten about Sasha, her memory only flickering faintly in the back of my mind. The last rung of the ladder to my loft bed was positioned right in front of the closet, and every time I climbed up, an icy dread washed over me. It was irrational, but turning my back to that closet felt like inviting something to creep up behind me. The small, suffocating space seemed to pulse with something unsettling, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong with it. Even as I write this, I find myself glancing over my shoulder every few minutes, half expecting to see something in the shadows. One night, exhausted from pulling an all-nighter to study for an exam, I climbed into bed, my eyes heavy. As I drifted off, I could have sworn I saw a ghostly pale head peek out from the closet's darkness. It was so vivid, pale, featureless, and utterly chilling. I told myself it was just my tired mind playing tricks, but the image burned into my memory, too real to dismiss entirely. Not long ago, I made a terrible mistake. Out of curiosity, I looked up the history of my house, searching for any deaths that might have occurred in its lifetime. The results sent a chill down my spine. In 1988, a mentally ill man had shot and killed his wife and daughter in my bedroom, the very room where I slept. If that wasn't horrifying enough, I learned he tried to take his own life afterward, but his gun was out of bullets. Instead, he hanged himself in my closet. My closet. The revelation made my skin crawl. I've always had a sensitivity to the paranormal, picking up on things others didn't. At my job in a factory, which used to be a morgue, I'd see strange things almost daily. Shadows, fleeting figures, unexplainable chills. But nothing, absolutely nothing, has ever felt as deeply unsettling or as profoundly terrifying as the experiences tied to that closet. A few years back, my girlfriend and I had been living together in a cozy little house for about 2 or 3 years. It was a quiet, uneventful place, the kind where nothing out of the ordinary ever seemed to happen. We'd settled into a comfortable routine, and life felt steady. For her birthday, we decided to do something special. She'd never had a pet growing up, while I'd always been surrounded by animals and cherished every one of them. After some thought, we adopted a French bulldog we named Cookie. She was a charming, wrinkly-faced pup with a personality that lit up our home. But soon after she arrived, things started to feel off. At night, we'd leave Cookie in the living room, where she had the whole sofa to herself. She'd curl up and fall asleep almost instantly, her loud snores echoing through the house like a tiny, snuffling engine. It was comforting, knowing she was settled. But one night, that peace shattered. I was jolted awake by frantic barking. At first, I assumed it was a stray dog outside. My bedroom window was open, letting in the cool night air, and sounds carried easily. But the barking didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent, and I realized it was coming from inside. Worried, I slipped out of bed and crept down the hall to check on Cookie. I eased the living room door open just enough to let the hallway light spill in, and there she was, barking wildly at the television. The screen was off, a blank void, yet she was fixated on it, her small body trembling with intensity. She didn't even notice me until I swung the door wide and flipped on the light. Only when I knelt beside her and gently patted her head did she finally quiet down, her eyes still darting toward the TV as if expecting something to emerge from it. About a week later, I was home alone, laid up in bed with a nasty cold. My girlfriend had gone to work as usual, leaving me to rest. I spent the morning playing games on my 3DS, the soft glow of the screen keeping me company. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a deep, feverish sleep. I don't know how long I was out, but I was yanked awake by a loud bang, like the front door slamming shut. My heart raced as I glanced at the clock, wondering if I'd slept through the entire day and my girlfriend was home. But then I heard it whispering. Dozens of voices, low and overlapping, hissing my name from every corner of the room. The air felt thick, oppressive, and when I tried to move, my body wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me. Heavy, deliberate footsteps began climbing the stairs, each thud reverberating in my chest. I told myself it was sleep paralysis, that my mind was playing tricks, but then the bedroom door creaked open on its own. I was lying on my stomach, my head turned toward the door, so I would have seen anyone or anything enter. But there was nothing, just the empty doorway and the echo of those footsteps drawing closer. The bed shifted, as if someone had climbed onto it. A cold, heavy pressure pressed against the middle of my back, like a hand pinning me down. The sensation was so wrong, so unnatural, it made my skin crawl. The whispers grew louder, more aggressive, each syllable of my name dripping with urgency. My body felt like it was made of lead, but with every ounce of strength I could muster, I forced my right arm to move. I reached over my shoulder, grabbing at whatever was holding me down. My fingers closed around something solid, and I pulled. The severed arm, not mine, tumbled onto the bed beside me, pale and lifeless. But the pressure on my back didn't stop. Tears streamed down my face as terror overwhelmed me. In desperation, I choked out a plea. "Please, God, help me." Instantly, the whispers ceased, the weight lifted, and the air felt clear again. I bolted upright, my heart pounding, and looked at the spot where the arm had fallen. Nothing. No arm, no figure, no sign of anything except the bedroom door, now wide open, swaying slightly as if it had just been pushed. My name is Gia, a 20-year-old college student of average height, and my best friend Susan is like family to me. Whenever I'm back home from college, we hang out, slipping into our familiar rhythm. One night, we were sprawled out at my place, just like always. I was sunk deep into the couch, playing Overwatch on my PS4, darting across the screen as Mercy, desperately trying to keep my teammates alive despite their reckless moves. Susan was curled up nearby, scrolling through Instagram on her phone, her face lit by the soft glow of the screen. We'd been at it for hours, lost in our own worlds but comfortable in each other's company. My German shepherd, Boomy, nudged my thigh with his wet nose, his big brown eyes looking up at me. That usually meant one of two things. He either needed to go out or was begging for attention. "All right, Boomy," I said, giving his soft head a pat as I waited for my game to respawn. "After this match, we'll take you out for a walk, like I promised." Once the game ended, I powered down the PS4, tugged on my combat boots, and grabbed Boomy's leash. He squirmed with excitement, tail wagging like crazy, making it a challenge to clip the leash onto his collar. Susan dragged herself off the couch, slipping on her sneakers with a yawn, and we headed out into the cool night air. It was a typical walk at first. Susan and I chatted about college, classes, annoying professors, the usual gripes, while Boomy sniffed every leaf, rock, and tree in sight, marking his territory with enthusiasm. The neighborhood was quiet, the streetlights casting soft pools of light on the pavement. Everything felt normal until a heavy, unsettling feeling hit me out of nowhere, like a storm cloud rolling in. Susan's voice broke through my unease. "Gia, is that a mailbox?" she asked, pointing across the street to a gap between some trees. Boomy was nose-deep in a bush, oblivious, so I followed her gaze. The moment my eyes landed on it, my heart plummeted. Standing there, maybe 100 feet away, was a massive figure, darker than the blackest night. It towered over us, its form impossible to pin down. Not human, not a shapeless blob, but something animalistic, yet wrong in a way I couldn't describe. The only clear feature was its eyes, huge and unblinking, reflecting the faint moonlight like twin mirrors locked onto us. Susan's question about a mailbox made sense now. Those glowing eyes could have been mistaken for reflective markers in the dark, but this was no mailbox. I've always believed in the paranormal, but I'm not one to jump to supernatural conclusions for every creepy thing. My first thought was a bear, maybe lost and wandering into our neighborhood. But that idea evaporated when Boomy, my fearless dog who'd bark at squirrels or deer without hesitation, began to whimper. His fur bristled along his shoulders, and he pressed himself against my legs, letting out soft, pathetic whines. He was terrified, torn between wanting to protect me and being paralyzed by fear. This wasn't a bear. With a shaking hand, I pulled a flashlight from my pocket and aimed it at the creature. That was a mistake. The beam revealed nothing new, just the same pitch-black mass and those piercing, reflective eyes glaring back. Worse, the creature let out a bone-chilling screech, high-pitched and unnatural, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. Susan didn't react to the sound, which made it even eerier. I turned to her, feeling her fear radiating off her small frame like heat. "Start backing up," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. She nodded, no argument, and began retreating slowly, her eyes wide with panic. Susan's like a little sister to me, and in that moment, I knew I'd fight this thing tooth and nail to keep her safe. Terrified as I was, I squared my shoulders, making myself as tall as possible, and glared back at the creature, trying to project defiance. It didn't move, didn't follow, just stood there with those unblinking eyes. Once Susan was about 100 feet back, I started retreating too, coaxing Boomy along. He obeyed without fuss, his tail tucked low, and we made it back to my house without incident. My pulse was racing, but I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few weeks later, I was back at college, an hour away from home. It was past midnight, and the campus dining halls were closed, so I'd gone out to grab some takeout. I was walking back to my dorm, a plastic bag of food swinging in my hand, cutting through a quiet, wooded part of campus. That same gut punch feeling from that night with Susan hit me again, stopping me dead in my tracks. I prayed it was a friend pulling a prank, but when I turned, there it was, the same massive pitch-black figure with those reflective white eyes, crouched low and staring right at me. My breath caught. I opened my mouth to say something, maybe "what do you want?" or "why are you following me?" But before I could, it opened a mouth I hadn't even noticed before. A horrible, distorted wail poured out, loud and unmistakable, mimicking the cry of a baby but warped in a way that made my stomach churn. I stood frozen, staring into its unblinking eyes for what felt like an eternity, shock rooting me to the spot. Then instinct kicked in, and I ran, sprinting back to my dorm without looking back, the wail echoing in my ears. We live in a small town, surrounded by other tiny farming communities, each with its own quiet charm. Our town has about 7,000 people, while the neighboring ones range from 500 to 3,000, depending on which dusty patch of land you're counting. My father's a police officer in one of these smaller towns, where his beat covers sprawling farmland with houses scattered a mile or so apart. Among these stretches lies an old, forgotten cemetery, tucked away in a way that it doesn't even show up on Google's searches. The place is called Killian's Graveyard, a name that feels ominous all on its own. The cemetery once belonged to an old church, long gone after it burned down years before we ever moved here. Whispers around town say that church was tied to some dark, satanic rituals, and folks swear that's why the graveyard hums with paranormal activity. Naturally, that makes it a magnet for teenagers looking for a thrill. They sneak out there at night, bottles in hand, to drink and dare each other to spot something spooky. I'll admit, I've been one of those kids sneaking beers in the shadow of crooked tombstones, though I never saw anything myself. My father, being a cop, often patrolled the area around Killian's Graveyard to check for kids up to no good. One night, he was making his rounds, cruising down the quiet road that runs alongside the cemetery. He pulled his squad car to the side, the gravel crunching under his tires, and flicked on his spotlight, sweeping its beam across the rows of headstones. The light cut through the darkness, illuminating cracked stones and patches of overgrown grass. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just the same eerie stillness you'd expect from a place like that. But as he swung the beam over the older section of the graveyard, where the stones are weathered and sinking into the earth, something caught his eye. Standing alone among the ancient graves was a girl in a dress. She appeared out of nowhere, so sudden it startled him. Her figure was clear in the spotlight's glare, but before he could process it, he'd already moved the beam past her. He swung it back, heart pounding, only to find the spot empty. She was gone, like she'd never been there at all. Shaken but duty-bound, my father stepped out of his squad car, the cool night air hitting him as he called out into the darkness. "Hello? Anyone there?" His voice echoed faintly, unanswered except by the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The cemetery's reputation for being haunted weighed on him. He'd heard the stories, same as everyone else. He searched for a moment, his flashlight beam darting between the graves, half expecting to see her again. But there was nothing, just the silent stones and the oppressive quiet of the night. Not wanting to linger in a place known for its ghostly rumors, he didn't stay long. He climbed back into his car, the doors slamming shut with a heavy thud, and drove off, leaving Killian's graveyard to its secrets. For a few months in high school, I had a job cleaning and locking up churches around town. It paid okay, but some of the scariest moments of my life happened in those empty buildings, their pews silent and their halls echoing with every step. One night, I was at a small church after midnight on a Saturday, the kind of hour where the world feels too still. I was alone, or so I thought when I heard what sounded like kids laughing and playing in the nursery. The sound sent a chill down my spine. Nobody should have been there, especially not at that hour. I checked the nursery, my flashlight shaking in my hand, only to find it empty, the toys untouched, the room cold and quiet. Another time, in a different church, a century-old building with creaking floors, I heard the deep, haunting notes of a church organ playing. It was late, well past midnight, and I was locking up alone again. My stomach dropped when I realized that organ hadn't worked in 25 years, its pipes rusted and silent. I wasn't the only one who'd heard it. Other workers whispered about it too, their faces pale when they shared their stories. But nothing compared to the night that made me quit. It was around 1:30 in the morning, and I was locking up a newer church, not one of the creepy old ones that felt like they belonged in a horror movie. This building was modern, with clean lines and a simple layout, a lobby, one long hallway, and about 13 rooms branching off it, plus a congregation hall. My girlfriend at the time was waiting in the car outside. She refused to set foot in these churches, spooked by stories like my dad's about the haunted cemetery and the eerie store. I couldn't blame her. I was on edge myself, armed only with a dinky keychain flashlight that barely cut through the darkness. I moved down the hallway, checking each door to make sure it was locked. The first 3 were secure, their handles clicking firmly when I tested them. But when I reached the last door at the end of the hall, my heart sank. It wasn't locked. I cursed under my breath, muttering a string of frustrated words about whoever had left it open. "Damn it," I said, my voice low but sharp. "Who the hell leaves a door unlocked in a place like this?" I was mid-rant, probably on my second or third curse, when it happened. Right in my ear, so close it felt like someone was standing behind me, a woman's scream erupted, loud, piercing, and furious. It wasn't distant or muffled. It was right there, like she was screaming into my soul. My body reacted before my brain could catch up. I jumped, spinning around in one frantic motion, my flashlight beam swinging wildly. There was nothing behind me, just the empty hallway, its walls closing in under the dim light. But the scream didn't stop. It followed me, blaring as loud as ever, like it was tethered to my side. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I tore down the hallway, my sneakers slapping against the floor, covering the 50 yards to the glass doors in what felt like under 3 seconds. I swear, if you'd put me up against Usain Bolt that night, I'd have left him in the dust, looking slower than an old man with a bad hip. The scream stayed with me, relentless, as I sprinted through the dark. I hit the glass doors with a thud, bursting out into the cool night air. My girlfriend, sitting in the car, later told me all she could see were my eyes, wide as baseballs, glowing with pure terror in the moonlight. I dove into the driver's seat, slammed gas, and peeled out, popping a curb as I sped away from that church. My hands were shaking, my breath ragged, and I kept thinking three things. Thank God I didn't see whatever was screaming, because I'm sure I would have pissed myself right there in front of my girlfriend. Thank God it stopped at the door, because if it had followed me to the car, both of us would have been a mess. And thank God I didn't drop my keys, because there was no way in hell I was going back inside that place. I quit the next day, and I've never set foot in that church again. Even now, when I pass by it, my stomach twists, and I can still hear that scream in my head, as vivid as it was that night. About 8 months ago, I moved to a small island in the South Pacific, chasing a quieter life surrounded by turquoise waters and dense jungles. I'd never been one for hiking back in my home state of Oregon, but something about the island's rugged beauty got me hooked. I started exploring new trails whenever work and life gave me a spare moment, which wasn't often enough. This story happened just 2 weeks ago, on a hike that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. Living in the South Pacific means dealing with brutal heat, so unless you're a glutton for punishment, hiking during the day is a sweaty nightmare. I'm no masochist, so I stick to early mornings or evenings when the air cools and the island feels alive with the hum of crickets and the rustle of leaves. I'd never been afraid to hike alone before. Back in Oregon, I'd wander trails solo without a second thought, and even in places like Montana and Wyoming, where I carried a handgun for bears or worse, I always felt safe enough. Pepper spray was my go-to here on the island, habit from those days, but I'd never needed it. I'd always been lucky until this night. It was around 6:30 in the evening when I pulled up to the trailhead for 1,000 Steps, a path I'd done so many times I could probably navigate it blindfolded. The name's a bit of a lie. It's less a staircase and more a winding descent to a cliff overlooking the ocean, with a grueling climb back up. My dog Moxie, a scrappy mutt with boundless energy, needed her walk, and I was itching to shake off the stress of a long workday. As I parked, I noticed an old, rusted blue pickup truck in the lot, its bed covered with a tattered plastic top to keep out the rain. These beat-up trucks, nicknamed gore bombs by the locals, are a common sight on the island, so I didn't think much of it. I clipped Moxie's leash on, grabbed my backpack, and started down the trail, swatting at the mosquitoes that were already buzzing around my neck, drawn to the sweat on my skin. The path was familiar, weaving through dense underbrush and past banana spiderwebs that glistened in the fading light. As I walked, the jungle grew darker, the air cooler, and I felt the tension of the day start to melt away. I reached the water's edge, where the trail ends at a rocky cliff with waves crashing below. That's when I noticed a man standing about 100 yards away, his silhouette barely visible in the dim light. It was too dark to tell if he was looking at me or just staring out at the ocean, so I brushed it off, focusing on Moxie instead. I pulled her favor ball from my backpack and tossed it a few times, letting her chase it with her usual wild enthusiasm, her tail wagging like a metronome. After a while, I sensed movement and looked up to see the man walking toward me. He stopped about 10 feet away, close enough that I could make out his figure, but not his face. I'm 23, about 5'6", and not exactly delicate, but something about him felt off. Most locals are on the shorter side, and he was only a couple of inches taller than me, but his presence made my stomach tighten. "Evening," I said, trying to sound casual, hoping to break the tension. He nodded, his eyes fixed on Moxie, who just bounded back with her ball, panting happily. I knelt down to pet her, keeping him in my peripheral vision. "Can I help you, sir?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Pretty dog," he said, his tone flat, almost too calm. Then he added, "You alone?" My heart skipped a beat. "I have my dog," I said, forcing a smile, though it felt weak. "I'm never alone," I added, trying to sound confident, gripping Moxie's leash a little tighter. He didn't react, just stared for a moment before turning and walking back toward the trailhead, his shadow swallowed by the trees. I waited, my pulse racing, for about half an hour, tossing Moxie's ball and scanning the darkness to make sure he was gone. Finally, I started the climb back up, Moxie pulling eagerly on her leash. The crickets were deafening now, their chirps filling the night as my flashlight beam bounced across the trail. My hands were full, one holding the leash, the other the light, but if I'd had a free hand, I'd have been clutching my pepper spray. When I reached the top, my blood ran cold. The rusted blue pickup was still there, but now its passenger door was pressed right up against my car's driver's side, so close I'd have to squeeze to open my door. In the dim glow of my flashlight, I could make out two men sitting in the truck's cab, their shape still but heavy with intent. I felt their eyes on me, watching, waiting. My heart pounded as I crept toward my car, sticking to the passenger side, keeping Moxie close. I opened the passenger door, climbed over the center console, and slid into the driver's seat, my hand shaking as I fumbled for my keys. Just as I reached the driver's side, the truck's door flew open, and Moxie went berserk, barking like a hellhound. Two men were out of the truck now, moving toward my car, their hands tugging at my locked doors. My chest tightened, panic surging through me. I jammed the keys into the ignition, the engine roaring to life, and peeled out of the lot so fast I nearly clipped my side mirror on their truck. I didn't stop shaking until I got home. I called my mom, my voice trembling as I told her what happened. She begged me to call the police, but the island's cops aren't like the ones on the mainland. Response times are slow, and some areas are known for trouble. Later that week, I learned from coworkers that the Thousand Steps trailhead is notorious for car thefts, muggings, and worse. Just earlier that month, a woman had vanished from that area, gone without a trace. The thought made my stomach churn. Those men in the pickup, were they connected? If Moxie hadn't been there, barking her head off, would I have been mugged or worse? I called the police eventually, reporting the truck and mentioning the missing woman. They said they'd look into it, but I haven't heard a thing since, and I can't shake the fear for her or the realization of how close I came to being in her place. That night taught me something I'll never forget. Hiking alone, especially as a woman, is a risk I can't take anymore. Now, I always carry pepper spray, hike in groups, and tell someone exactly where I'm going. It's not just a good idea, it might save your life. Yesterday evening, just after 6 p.m., my wife Carrie and I were in the kitchen preparing dinner. The familiar clatter of pots and pans filled the air as we worked together, the comforting routine of a typical evening settling in. Our 6-year-old son Kyle walked in from the back patio, his small figure framed by the sliding glass door. He was clutching a folded piece of paper in his hand, his face clouded with an odd expression that immediately caught my attention. Kyle is a creative kid, always drawing, reading, or scribbling stories, so seeing him with paper wasn't unusual. But he'd just been outside hitting a baseball off the tee, and there was no reason for him to be holding a note. Something about his demeanor, his wide eyes and hesitant steps, felt off. Kyle wears his emotions openly, and I could tell something was wrong. When I asked to see the paper, his face twisted into that familiar look he gets when he thinks he's in trouble. He hesitated, gripping the note tightly before reluctantly handing it over after I insisted. I unfolded it carefully, my curiosity tinged with unease. The words, written in a neat but unsettlingly deliberate hand, sent a chill through me. Dear Kyle, I know this note may sound scary. Your daddy will think it is. But grown-ups don't know how friendship can grow when kids are just left to be kids. And what a kid you've become, Kyle. You're growing as fast as a weed. Last night, off the tee, you stroked it for 3, and your team took a 2-run lead. Yes, I've been watching a while now, it's true. I think we would make perfect friends. You're a kid through and through, and I am one too, even if just for pretense. The problem, I fear, is your parents. I doubt they would let us hang out. One is just rude, the other a prude, church-going, pure, holy, devout. I've got an idea. Can you tell my hands are shaking? For me, and you getting together tomorrow at 3, you can come and see me at the address attached to this letter. But please, pretty please, don't tell your dad. Your mom, and he won't understand. Just come by yourself. I'll be dressed as an elf, and we can even hold hands. Would you like that? You will? You really will, Kyle. We will have so much fun. So I'll see you at 3 by the sycamore tree, where our 2 kindred souls become one. At the bottom of the page was an address, 3 orange circle. My stomach dropped. This wasn't some childish prank. Carrie, my wife, is the youth group leader at our church, and Kyle had played in a t-ball game the previous night. Orange Circle is just one street over from ours, and I was almost certain Lot 3 was the corner house on the cul-de-sac, an empty, abandoned property with a towering sycamore tree in its backyard. The thought that someone had been watching Kyle's game, observing him, made my skin crawl. What would have happened if I hadn't seen this letter? I called out to Carrie, my voice sharp with panic. "Carrie, come here, quick." She rushed into the kitchen, her eyes widening as she read the note over my shoulder. Her face went pale, and she let out a strangled gasp before bolting to the phone to call the police. As she dialed, I flipped the note over and noticed more text on the back, written in reverse. At first, I couldn't make sense of it, but then I realized it was meant to be read in a mirror. Holding it up to the reflection, the words came into focus, and my blood ran cold. "Just in case your dad's reading this, it's time to tell him a story. If your mom flaps her hole or your dad tells a soul, I'm afraid things might get rather gory." On the 10th of July 1995, a woman named Susie went missing. Susie, you see, unlike you and me, wasn't careful about who she'd been kissing. I kept her a while, but old things get so boring, and in time I had got my fill. I threw her away, to my great dismay. The hunger I felt plagued me still. I try to bury it deep down inside where nothing down there can escape. But lately, it seems, I see Kyle in my dreams, and that hunger can no longer hide. Now that you know what I'm capable of more than both of you can comprehend, if one word is spoken, then children get broken, and Susie will have a friend. The police arrived within 30 minutes, their flashing lights casting eerie shadows through our living room windows. We handed over the note, explaining everything. They instructed us to stay inside, lock the doors, and keep Kyle close for the night. The realization that this person had likely been in our fenced-in backyard, leaving the note for Kyle to find, made me sick. I cursed myself for not installing the security camera I'd received for Christmas, still sitting unopened in the garage. Thank God nothing happened that night. This morning, the detective assigned to our case called with an update. He'd reviewed missing persons records from 1995, and the name from the note, Susan Carrington, matched the case. She had vanished on July 10, 1995, exactly as the note claimed. The last person to see her was a friend from her 24-hour gym. Susan had mentioned meeting someone new and was getting a quick workout in before their second date. She was never seen again, and the man was never identified. The worst part? Susan's last known address was 3 Orange Circle. The coincidence was too precise to ignore. The detective called again later, informing us they were sending an unmarked patrol car with 2 plainclothes officers to 3 Orange Circle at 3 p.m. today to investigate. Kyle's school was notified, and he's safe there, kept inside during recess. I promise to update tomorrow with any news. It's surreal how life can be humming along, cooking dinner, laughing with your family, and then something like this shatters everything. This morning, I woke up with Kyle sleeping between Carrie and me, the world feeling drained of color. My stomach is still in knots, but at least Kyle is safe. The support from others has been a small comfort. We've never faced anything like this and hope we never will again. Detective Carr stopped by our house last night around 7 p.m. His thinning hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it all day. His phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls, which he silenced and tucked into the case on his belt with a weary sigh, as if to say he'd had enough. He updated us on the officers dispatched to Orange Circle at 3 p.m. They parked in a nearby driveway with a clear view of Lot 3, watching for nearly an hour. No one showed up, which didn't surprise me. The lot backs up to an undeveloped forested area, meaning whoever wrote the note could have slipped in and out without using the street, likely why they chose that location. The officers walked to the house and found a back door pried open. Without a search warrant, they couldn't enter, but they're requesting one today. The detective asked us a barrage of questions. Have we made enemies recently? Has anything unusual happened at church? Have we noticed anyone strange at Kyle's t-ball games? They were good questions, but we had no good answers. Carrie and I racked our brains, trying to think of anything that might have triggered this, but came up empty. The detective believes this person is someone we know, or at least someone who knows us. They're likely educated, possibly college educated, and smart enough to avoid leaving fingerprints. The forensics lab is analyzing the note, but he doubts they'll find anything useful unless the person has a prior arrest record. I have a sinking feeling they don't. He's also requested the full missing persons file on Susan Carrington, stored in the basement of City Hall, hoping it might hold clues about who this person could be. When the detective left, I felt exposed, vulnerable. I started questioning every harsh word I've ever said, every slight I might have given, no matter how small. Could Carrie and I have brought this on ourselves with something we said or did? The guilt gnaws at me, like the feeling you get when you're trying to sleep but know you've left something undone. It's useless to dwell on, but my mind won't stop. We barely slept last night with Kyle between us. He's still going to school, it's safer there, with controlled access and security cameras everywhere. Even if this person is one of his teachers, which I doubt, they wouldn't dare act in such a public setting. That's not their style. Our security cameras are being installed this afternoon. I wish they'd been set up yesterday. I saved the worst for last because transcribing this makes my skin crawl. This morning, when Carrie went to get the newspaper, she found a single white envelope in our mailbox. Inside was another folded note. Dean and Carrie, brilliant, just brilliant. I know what you did. Did you really think I wouldn't see? I warned you that talking would bring me a knocking, and now there is nowhere to flee. You've broken your vow, and you both know by now you brought this down on your own heads. I gave you a chance, but in this soundless dance, you only get one for your dead. Remember that I am the faceless, the shadow that hunts in the night. Anyone, really or no one, and clearly you're both unprepared for this fight. A reprieve, I believe, though short, I admit, is in order before we begin. If I can't get to Kyle, I'll paint on a smile and start with one of his friends. I heard Carrie scream as I sat at the breakfast table. The dread that surged through me felt like an electric shock. I knocked my cereal bowl off the table, the milk splashing across the floor as I scrambled toward the front door. Carrie reached it just as I opened it, collapsing into my arms, sobbing hysterically. She'd been barely holding it together before, but now she's broken. I don't know what we're going to do. Detective Carr plans to put something in the paper tomorrow, and I'll have to talk to Kyle about this. I didn't want to scare him, but he needs to know. I want to pack up and leave, but it's impossible. We have no savings, I'm still paying off student loans, and we have bills. We can't just abandon our jobs. Until we figure this out, we're stuck here, questioning the motives of every person we meet, wondering if they're the one. The nausea hit me like a punch to the gut this morning, so intense I could barely type these words. Where do I even begin? Everything spiraled out of control after we received the second note yesterday. Carrie didn't hesitate. She called Kyle's school and spoke directly to the principal, laying out both notes, including the second one's chilling threats against Kyle's friends. The principal acted fast, sending an email to the school's parent listserv with all the details. He assured everyone the school was likely the safest place for their kids, but gave parents the option to pick them up if they preferred. With small class sizes, each teacher was also tasked with personally calling their students' parents to follow up. We got the email about 15 minutes later. After some back and forth, Carrie and I decided to leave Kyle at school for now. We'd had a security system installed at home the day before, but the school felt like a safer bet, and it gave Kyle a sense of normalcy amid the chaos. I sat him down yesterday to explain what was happening, as gently as I could. He's a perceptive kid. He grasped the gravity of it right away. The first thing he said was, "I'm sorry," his voice breaking as he started to cry, as if any of this was his fault. My heart shattered. I know exactly how he feels, buddy. Kyle's guilt over handing us that first note mirrors the guilt Carrie and I feel, wondering if we somehow triggered this psychopath. That's probably what the sicko wanted all along, and he's succeeding in tearing us apart. I called my boss and got yesterday and today off work. I tested the new security system, double-checked every window and door, and made sure everything was locked tight. Then I started calling neighbors to warn them. It's surreal having to tell your 90-year-old neighbor across the street that there might be a serial killer or pedophile on the loose and to keep her doors and windows secured. She could barely hear me, but I hope she understood. I had a similar conversation with a mom a few doors down who has 2 kids in middle school. She was walking her dog when I told her, and she froze, her face draining of color. She yanked out her phone and started dialing her husband, panic in her eyes. Then came the call from Detective Carr. They gotten a search warrant and raided the house at 3 Orange Circle, just one street over, less than a quarter mile from us. If I'd stood on my roof, I might have seen them go in. A wave of relief washed over me when he said no one was living there. No one was hiding out in the neighborhood watching us. But the relief was short-lived. He mentioned they'd found evidence, though he wouldn't say what, claiming it could compromise the case. My mind raced. That house must have been used for something sinister. He mentioned a basement with a thin concrete floor that looked suspiciously new. He thinks if Susan Carrington, who went missing years ago, is dead, she might be buried there. They're starting to dig it up tomorrow. He also tracked down Susan's missing persons file, not much in it, but the detective who worked the case in '95 still lives here. He's retired but willing to talk, and Detective Carr hopes he might recall details that didn't make it into the report, something that seemed insignificant at the time. It's their only lead right now, and they're meeting today. I've been dreading this next part, and my hands are shaking as I type. This morning, I went to grab the newspaper, hoping for an article warning the town about this monster. At least then, people would be on guard, and I could breathe a little easier. Instead, the headline hit me like a sledgehammer. Police on the hunt for child's kidnapper. Everything became painfully real. Deep down, I'd clung to the hope that this guy was just a deranged loner who wouldn't act on his threats. That headline shattered that illusion. I skimmed the article until I saw the boy's name, Andrew. He's not one of Kyle's close friends, but I know him from Kyle's t-ball team. I know his parents. They pulled him out of school yesterday after the principal's email. My heart aches for them. No one deserves this nightmare. Carrie's beside herself, even though it's not our son who was taken. This is every parent's worst fear. The newspaper published another note from the kidnapper, sent directly to them this time, so the whole town could read it. The police chief is reportedly furious. They printed what amounts to evidence. The editor, always chasing a scoop, might lose his job over this. He redacted the names, but in a small town like ours, everyone will know who it's about. The note read, "Greetings. I see you, you don't see me, and now all the others do. The masks on your faces are broken in places, and the darkness is now shining through." What darkness, you say? Oh no. The past is a fickle old hag. She sneaks up in silence and dishes out violence, wipes the knife on her sleeve like a brag. You couldn't just follow instructions and push me to do this, you know. And now it's your fault as I open the vault and all your dark secrets go. But first, I've got a new toy, and new things always make me grin. Wind him up tight when day turns to night, and that's when the fun will begin. Unless, like the one said, you'd rather me have my fun. I consider returning young Andrew, who's yearning to break free from his chains and to run. But first, it's true 10 years ago, and I think you know just where I'm going. Remember your ass pressed up to the glass and the men in the car you were blowing? I sat there stunned. This monster isn't just trying to scare us. He's trying to destroy our lives. I called Carrie immediately, shaking as I read her the note. I demanded to know what it meant, if she'd ever cheated on me. She denied everything, but I couldn't shake the image from my mind. She's at work today, but we'll have to talk when she gets home. I'm torn between wondering if she's hiding something, or if this lunatic is just making it up to hurt us. I can't dwell on that now. I just want to find Andrew. I'm hoping Detective Carr's meeting with a retired detective yields something. It might be Andrew's only chance. Carrie and I met about 16 years ago, late 2001, at a church picnic. I was new to town, so when a coworker invited me to tag along on a Sunday afternoon, I went. I'd heard churches and supermarkets were good places to meet wholesome single women, and that date proved it. I saw her standing behind a bowl of fried chicken, wearing a greasy apron with Union Street Methodist Church printed on it, laughing as she served up legs, thighs, and breasts. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight ponytail that swung as she moved, like a cheerleader. I was hooked from the moment I saw her. After lunch, we started talking, hit it off, and began dating soon after. We got married in October 2002, the best day of my life. The second best was when Kyle was born. Reading that note in the paper tore my heart in two. Despite Carrie's denial, I couldn't shake the image of her with another man. By the time she got home last night, I was seething, the newspaper clutched in my hand. "Why weren't you answering your text?" I demanded. "Sorry, babe, I got busy. You know how my boss is, I can't have my phone out at work," she said. "You've always been able to text before. What's going on?" Her face gave her away. She's a terrible liar, and I knew something was up. That realization softened my anger. She looked hurt. "Nothing, Dean," she said, avoiding my eyes as she moved to the living room. Kyle was watching TV, and she told him to go to his room. She started picking up things from the couch, pretending to clean. I know that look. "You're a terrible liar, babe. Please. Andrew is missing, and this psycho has him. If any part of that letter is true, you have to tell me. Whatever it is, we'll get through it." The words burned my throat, but I meant them. She looked at me, tears welling, and broke down, crumpling onto the couch sobbing. I sat beside her, rubbing her back. "Carrie, it's okay," I said, my heart pounding. I braced for something that could change everything. "I didn't think it had anything to do with this," she whispered. "It was a mistake. I never meant for it to happen. Just tell me, Carrie. Please." She wiped mascara from her face. "It was that weekend you were out of town with your friends, 9 years ago. I remembered the trip, a rare getaway with college buddies. I didn't get back until late Sunday. Me and the girls went to a bar that Friday night," she continued. "I swear I didn't drink much, maybe a couple of beers, no liquor, no shots. There was this guy," and she trailed off. "And what, Carrie?" I pressed, my voice tight. She finally met my eyes. "Don't make me say it." "It's true." My stomach dropped. "I'm so sorry. I remember sitting at the bar with Jenny, and this guy started talking to us. Next thing I know, I'm in his car in a parking lot by the river. I don't even remember how I got there. I was so ashamed. I swear we didn't have sex. He wanted to, but I said no. I was tearing up, fighting back anger. Some random guy in a parking lot. I'm trying to understand, Carrie. I know it doesn't make sense. I've never done anything like that before. And he wasn't random. That's the messed up part. I met him at church, our church. That Friday was a service day. We were going to Gentle Hills Nursing Home to visit residents. The youth group does this clowning thing. They dress up, paint their faces, bring balloons. The residents love it. I brought the idea to the adult Sunday school class, and they wanted to do it too. He was there at the church. I never noticed him before, but I assumed he was someone's friend. I was speechless, tears streaming down my face. "Did he tell you his name?" I asked. "Ray, I think." "If he told me his last name, I don't remember." She paused. "Dean, I know what you're thinking. It couldn't be the same guy. He was normal jeans, button-down shirt, clean cut. He was drunk that night, but otherwise he seemed normal. He said he was an accountant. He made some joke about us making good-looking kids, but I thought he was just flirting. I laughed it off, said I didn't want kids. That was before Kyle, obviously. Have you seen him since?" I asked, dreading the answer. She hesitated. He called me the next day. I guess I'd given him my number. He said he wanted to see me again, that he was in love with me. I was so ashamed. I hung up and blocked his number. I swear I never saw him again. I just wanted to forget it. She turned to me, tears streaming. "Dean, I'm so sorry. I have no excuses. I drank too much and made a terrible mistake. I know I've ruined everything, and now with the kids. Please, babe." I wanted to say it was over, but I couldn't. I still love her despite everything. I blamed her for not telling me when we got the first note, though there was no reason to connect the two at the time. I went to Kyle's room and sat on his bed. He was playing with figurines on the floor. When he saw me, he looked up. "Is the bad man coming to get me? Is that why Mommy's crying?" I got down on the floor and hugged him. "No, buddy. I won't let that happen. I'm your dad. It's my job to protect you, and I will. I promise." I hope he believed me. I didn't tell him about Andrew, and I'm not sure I ever will. I avoided Carrie for the rest of the night. It felt awful, especially knowing what she was going through, but I couldn't face her. Around 10 p.m., Detective Carr called. I stepped onto the back porch to talk, not wanting to wake Carrie, who was asleep in the bedroom. He'd visited the retired detective who worked Susan Carrington's case. The detective remembered it vividly. Missing persons cases are rare in our town, and this one haunted him. Susan, a 21-year-old from a good family, vanished without a trace. He confirmed the details in the missing persons report. She was last seen at a 24-hour gym. A friend, Emily, said Susan was excited about seeing a guy she'd met the night before, wanting to look good in a sleeveless top. She wasn't the type to frequent bars or get in trouble. Her main social outlet was her church. What church? I asked, my heart racing. Union Street, Detective Carr replied. Our church. I had to tell him about Carrie's encounter. It made the wound feel raw again, but I recounted every detail. Though Carrie didn't think the guy she met was the kidnapper, Detective Carr noted the Union Street connection. Susan might have met this Ray there, too. He wondered why Carrie didn't recognize Susan's name, but I explained that Carrie didn't move to town until '99, long after Susan's case faded from the public eye. He hung up quickly, saying he had leads to follow. I knew he wouldn't sleep tonight. I sat on the back porch, staring into the dark backyard, imagining this creep skulking through the shadows. Why target Kyle? Why now, after nearly a decade? One thing was clear, this monster liked dressing as a clown and used the church as his hunting ground. I returned to the couch but barely slept, haunted by images of a crew at 3 Orange Circle tearing up that concrete floor, uncovering Susan Carrington's shallow grave. I prayed Andrew wouldn't share her fate. This morning, there was no newspaper article, as I'd hoped. There hadn't been time for Detective Carr to share updates. But during breakfast, the radio morning show interviewed him. He urged people to stay indoors after dark and secure their homes. Then he described the suspect, a man in his mid-40s, possibly college-educated, clean-cut, with a regular job, maybe an accountant. He might project a polished image but feel childlike when alone. He could work children's parties, doing balloon animals or face painting, or dress as Santa or the Easter Bunny. He might attend t-ball games, not related to any players. His name might be Ray. He's smart and cunning, Detective Carr said. He craves this attention. It fuels him. He may be mentally ill. He's killed once and could again. Do not confront him. Call the police. On my way back from dropping Kyle at school, I drove by 3 Orange Circle. 2 police cruisers and a construction truck were parked out front, crime scene tape strung up. I saw a worker carrying 2 buckets from the back of the house. He dumped what looked like broken concrete chunks into a green dumpster bag in the front yard, then headed back. I could almost hear the jackhammer's relentless grind in the basement, tearing through the darkness. There's a certain terror in knowing your life has veered onto a completely different path than the one you planned, and there's not a single thing you can do to stop it. Just 4 days ago, I could have looked ahead at the next 2, 3, or even 5 years and said with confidence that I knew how things would unfold. Not anymore. Every day feels like a living nightmare, but it's the uncertainty of what tomorrow might bring that truly terrifies me. Yesterday afternoon, Carrie and I started talking again. Short, hesitant conversations, nothing deep, but it's a start, I suppose. My heart still feels shattered. I'm worried about her well-being, and that concern is starting to outweigh my own pain. She's barely eating, and if it's possible to lose noticeable weight in just a couple of days, she has. She was already thin to begin with. When she looks at me with those puffy, red-rimmed eyes, it's like I can read her thoughts. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. I've been turning something over in my mind, something that doesn't sit right. It's entirely possible that Carrie was drugged. The idea of her cheating on me with a stranger in his car, it just doesn't feel like the Carrie I know. It feels wrong, off in a way I can't explain. If the person who left those messed up notes and took Andrew is the same person who lured Carrie down to the river, the idea that she was roofied seems far more plausible. I can't shake the thought that Carrie saved her own life when she blocked Ray's number from her phone. She might not have survived a second encounter. Still, that nagging, smirking voice is always there in the back of my mind, whispering, asterisk, you're so gullible, Dean. She cheated, asterisk, and if what she says is true, why did she hide it from you? Why indeed? Shame, maybe. Or maybe she just didn't want to get caught. It's hard to ignore that voice, but I'm trying. Detective Carr stopped by yesterday, around 4 to interview Carrie. He thought she'd be more open about her experience with Ray if she didn't have to talk about it in front of me, so I sat outside on the porch while they spoke. That jealous little voice badgered me the entire time, needling me with doubts. When they finished, Carrie left the house to run an errand, and Carr and I talked in the living room. The police department had been flooded with dozens of calls after the radio show, which had sent our small town into a frenzy. Giving a name and a persona to this psychopath, whether accurate or not, had struck a nerve. People were reporting every little suspicious thing they saw, which meant a mountain of work for Carr and his team. Every person wearing a hoodie, acting strangely, or lingering somewhere they wouldn't normally be was reported. The mall canceled its Easter Bunny pictures, which were supposed to happen every day in the week leading up to Easter. I got a text from Kyle's coach explaining that Kyle's t-ball season was temporarily canceled. No one wanted to be responsible for another child being taken. Carr said every lead needed to be followed, no matter how small, but he knew he'd be lucky if any of them led anywhere. Before he left, I asked him about what was going on at 3 Yard Circle, if they'd found anything. He said the construction crew had finished breaking up the concrete floor and hauling it out just after lunch. He was waiting on the forensics team, really just 2 officers with some specialized training in evidence collection, to get over there and start digging. I pressed him again about the evidence he'd found, even though he'd already refused to share details. He looked like he was weighing his options, then said he could show me one thing. He pulled out his phone, flipped through some pictures, and held it up to my face. The image showed a Polaroid photograph lying on a scuffed wooden floor. The lighting was dim, making it hard to see clearly. For a split second, I thought it was a picture of Carrie. The blonde hair pulled back tightly like a cheerleader's was almost identical. Then I realized who it was, Susan Carrington. Carr nodded when he saw the recognition on my face. Yes, I see the similarity, he said. When I asked if he thought this was all about Carrie the entire time, he shrugged. I'm not sure about that yet. It's an odd coincidence, if not. I thought he might agree to show me more of what he'd found, but he glanced at his watch and demurred. Sorry, I've been here too long as it is. Every minute is precious when you've got a child missing. Shortly after he left, I got a text from Ryan, a friend whose son played on Kyle's t-ball team. I've been keeping him updated on what was happening. His message read, "You might want to see this," attached with a screenshot of a text Ryan had received from Andrew's dad. It said, "What the hell does this mean?" Below it was a picture of a note. Asterisk, I'm going to keep this short and sweet before things get too scary. If you want to know why I chose Andrew to die, you better ask Dean and Carrie, asterisk. I felt like throwing up. Who did this sick bastard think he was? It wasn't enough to terrorize us. He wanted to turn the entire community against us. I had no idea why he chose Andrew. The only thing I knew, or thought I knew, especially after seeing the picture of Susan that looked so much like Carrie, was that this was never really about Kyle or Andrew. It felt like he was targeting Carrie the entire time. One other thing was certain. He wanted to destroy our reputation in the community. That's why he left that note for Andrew's dad. I knew the picture would spread, and Carrie's and my names would be dragged through the mud. But that voice was added again. Asterisk, you're just gullible, Dean. A sucker. What if it's more than that? Asterisk. When Carrie got back from her errand, I showed her the picture. Any idea what this means? Is there something you're not telling me? No, Dean, I swear to God, I have no idea what this means. She grabbed my phone and read the note again. He's sick. That's what it is. He's sick, and he's trying to destroy us. Was he telling the truth in the last note, or this one? She grabbed my arm, the first time we touched since the day before. I have a lot of groveling to do, I get that. But please, if you've ever trusted me, if you have any love for me left, any single solitary bit, believe me now. Please believe me. I don't know what this means. Her eyes held mine, and in that moment, I believed her. The little voice fell silent. I dropped the phone in frustration. What are we going to do? I don't know, Dean. I just hope Andrew is okay. Do you think they'll find him? That reminded me of something. Tomorrow at church, will you ask Linda in the front office if you can look at the church's membership records? I assume Detective Carr will be by there now that he's talked to you, but maybe we can get a head start. I want to see if there's a Ray listed anywhere. Okay. Are you going with me? I don't think so. I don't feel very close to God right now. She looked hurt by my words, but she also seemed to understand. This morning, Carrie went to Union Street and met Glenda before Sunday school. The church didn't keep digital membership records, but Glenda had a box with all the membership bulletins from the last 10 years, the kind with each member's picture and name underneath. When Carrie called, her voice was heavy with disappointment. She couldn't find anyone named Ray or Raymond. She asked Glenda to make copies of the bulletins for Detective Carr and said he'd probably stop by later to pick them up. While Carrie was at the church, I got a call from Ryan. Apparently, one of the dads was upset that the entire T-ball season had been canceled. I know some of these guys, you probably know some like them too. They drive big trucks, own guns, and feel like they could protect their sons just fine if the season continued. Deep down, I sort of agreed with them, but I also understood the need for caution. Andrew was taken right out from under his dad's nose after all. Ryan wasn't as bad as some of them, but he agreed that this psychopath wouldn't make a move in the open like that. They were planning a practice game today at 1 o'clock just to get some of the kids together at the field, let them feel like they were actually playing, full uniform, scoreboard, ref, the whole deal. The problem was none of the dads could get in touch with the head ref. They'd been texting and calling him since the season was canceled, but he hadn't responded. That's what Ryan called about to gripe about the ref. His call was breaking up, but I thought he said he's usually here whenever we need him. He loves doing these games. He's out here every chance he gets. Wait a minute, say that again. I said he's usually out here, but won't answer his phone. You just gave me a heart attack. Jay who? Do you know him? Jason Fisher. He's been the head referee for a while. Who's his kid? He doesn't have any kids of his own. Just likes baseball, I guess. When he said it, something clicked in my brain, like a bell ringing. How old is Jay? I don't know, close to our age, maybe 40s. My heart started pounding. Have you talked to him in the last couple of days? Any idea why he's not answering? No, like I said, he usually texts back. He's the one who assigns the other refs when he can't make it. I guess I'll need to track down someone else's number. Keep trying to reach him. Ryan, listen, if you get him, do you mind letting me know? Yeah, why? I don't know. Maybe I'll bring Kyle out there. Really? I thought you said, just let me know, okay? Sure. Listen, I gotta go. I'll talk to you later. My hands were clammy. I texted Carrie, *emergency. Please call me back, *. About 2 minutes later, she called, and I was practically hyperventilating. What's wrong? What happened? Nothing. Everything's fine here. Sorry I scared you. She breathed a sigh of relief. I need you to do something for me right now. Can you go back to the office? I want you to look for another name. I'll stay on the phone. Another name? Okay, hold on. I could hear the phone rustling as she hurried down the front steps of the church and around to the side door that led to the office. Okay, I'm here. Glenda left the bulletins out for the detective. They're here on the desk. Carrie, look for Jason Fisher, starting with the ones from 2007. Yeah, '07 Jason Fisher. Okay, let me see. I waited. She was breathing heavily, and I could hear her flipping through the pages. Then she gasped. When she spoke again, her voice had a new quality, like that of a frightened animal. Oh hell. Oh hell, Dean. What? It's him, Dean. It's him. It wasn't Ray. It was Jay. You sure? Yes, I'm sure. I don't remember a lot, but I'll never forget those eyes. He's a T-ball ref, Dean. He took Andrew. I know it. Oh hell. I missed Kyle's first game, but I was there for the second. Why didn't I recognize him? I don't know, but I actually spoke to him during Kyle's first game. He hit a grounder to first, and the ref called him out when he was clearly safe. It was a bad call. Everyone said so, and I let him know that. That's why he said I was so rude. It's not your fault, Dean. Hey, I better call Car. I love you. Bye. I hung up before she could respond and dialed Car's number. As it rang, I thought, hold on, Andrew. Just a little longer. The phone rang 3 times before a voice answered, sharp and urgent. It's Jay, not Ray. Wait, slowed down. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Carrie? Carrie looked at the church membership bulletin from '07. She recognized Jason Pfizer as the guy from 10 years ago when I trailed off, the words catching in my throat. Okay. And he's a T-ball ref, umpire, whatever you call them. He goes by Jay, and no one's been able to reach him, not for days. I think he's got Andrew. We have to hurry. The bulletin should list an address. He may not still live there, but it's as good a start as any. I paused, my mind racing. I'll call you back. I hung up and dialed Carrie's cell. After 5 or 6 rings, her voicemail kicked in. I didn't leave a message, just hung up and shot her a text. Need Jay's address. Check the bulletin. I leapt off the couch, grabbed my keys, and rushed to my truck. I climbed inside, my hand tapping impatiently on the steering wheel. I started to text Ryan to see if he knew Jay's address or could track it down when Carrie's reply popped up, 15 Franklin Drive. I texted back, thank you. Is Kyle okay? Her response was immediate. Nursery at church. Fine. I called Detective Carr as I whipped the truck out of the garage, tires screeching. When he answered, I was practically shouting. 15 Franklin Drive. That's his address. I've got it, Carr said, his voice calm but firm. I've already radioed it in, and I'm heading that way. Dean, are you on the road? I turned down the radio, which was blaring some god-awful pop song I'd heard a million times before. Look, this guy is extremely dangerous, Carr continued, his siren starting to wail in the background. You and Carrie need to stay where you are and don't. I hung up, tossing my phone onto the passenger seat. He was right, but there was no way I was sitting this out. Carrie and I had gotten Andrew into this mess, and I had a sinking feeling he'd need at least one of us to get him out. I called Carrie twice more on the drive. This is Carrie, leave a message, her voicemail said both times. The second time I left one. Carrie, where are you? Are you okay? Please call me back. Franklin Drive was about 10 minutes from our house, according to my GPS, but I made it in 8. The streets were deserted on Sunday mornings, and I hit nearly every green light. If Carr was anywhere near the police station, he'd be several minutes behind me. As I turned onto Franklin Drive, my stomach dropped like I'd been punched. Carrie's white SUV was parked in front of a small brick house about 3/4 of the way down the street. I recognized it instantly, the purple sticker from Kyle's school glaring on the back window. In that moment, for some strange reason, the only thought in my head was, at least I told her I loved her. It's a brutal thing to think about someone you love. I pulled in behind her SUV and jumped out of the truck. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, but I couldn't wait. Carrie was inside somewhere. I started toward the front door, which was closed, but then I heard shouting from the back of the house. The gate on the side was open, swinging slightly in the breeze. I ran around a house and barreled into the backyard. Jay stood in the center of the yard, but he wasn't what I'd expected. He was tall, over 6 feet, with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. A wispy beard sprouted along his jaw and neck, and the hint of a belly pushed against the bottom of his too small t-shirt. He stood unsteady, like a prizefighter after a losing bout, his legs barely holding him up. Andrew was next to him, standing on a box perched atop a tall kitchen stool. Duct tape covered his eyes and mouth, and he stood perfectly still, hands at his sides. A noose was tied around his neck, the rope stretching up to a branch of a sycamore tree high above. Carrie stood in front of me, slightly to the left, still in her church dress, the fabric billowing in the breeze around her thin frame. Jay was screaming at her to stay back. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. I wondered when you'd show up, Dino. Such a rude one you are. Didn't your mother tell you that wasn't nice? Carrie glanced back at me, but kept her body angled toward the threat. Her lips mouthed, I'm sorry, before she turned back to Jay. Just let him go, Jay, she said, her voice steady but pleading. I held up my empty hands. I'm sorry for being rude. No one needs to get hurt. No one needs to get hurt. Jay's voice was bitter, mocking. It's too late for that, bucko. What do you want? I asked, trying to keep him talking. You, Carrie. It was always you. Why the note to the paper, then? Surely there was a better way to have me. You ruined me, he spat, his voice breaking. You outed yourself because you lied to me, and I didn't want to lie anymore. If I'd come looking for you, you never would have had to tell Dean about our little affair. So I pushed you, and then you had a choice. Tell Dean our little secret so he could put the pieces together, or keep it from him and let little Andrew die. Since you're here, I guess you came clean. What a wonderful little moment that must have been. Now everyone will know, and no one will want you, not even your husband. He turned away from her, his voice dripping with venom. How's that wonderful marriage now? Do you like my sloppy seconds? Okay, you won, Jay, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. You won. What do you want? To hurt Andrew. I don't want to hurt Andrew. He ran a shaking hand through his hair. All this time, I've been good. All this time. When you're good, you're supposed to get a treat. He looked back at Carrie, his eyes wild. You told me you didn't want to have kids. You said that. And then I heard them call Kyle's name at his t-ball game, and I saw you in the stands, and He swayed, his hip bumping the stool. It wobbled, and Andrew flailed his arms, balancing himself as the stool steadied. Something fell from the back of the box behind Andrew's feet. Jay leaned down and picked it up, a large kitchen knife. You just what, Jay? I said, desperate to keep him talking. The sirens had stopped. The police were close, maybe outside. Carrie was supposed to be mine, and so was Kyle. How can we fix it, Jay? Carrie took a step forward, her voice soft but firm. How can we fix it? We can trade, Jay said, his voice low and dangerous. Your life, Carrie. I took a step forward but froze when Jay pressed the knife against Andrew's side and shook his head. Then he pointed the knife at Carrie. Your life or Andrew's? That's the deal. That's what all of this has come to. If I can't have you, no one can. It's the only way. He pressed the knife harder against Andrew's side. And if you refuse, you'll have to live with. Drop the knife. Now. Detective Carr's voice cut through the air. He stood at the gate, his service weapon drawn. Jay wobbled to his left, hiding behind Andrew, his foot on the first rung of the stool like he was ready to kick it over. Andrew was high off the ground. A fall could break his neck before he suffocated. Touch him, and you die, Jay snarled. Jay, listen to me, Carr said, his voice steady. Put the weapon down. Two other officers appeared beside Carr, their weapons drawn. No, wait, I said, my heart pounding. Jay ignored everyone but Carrie, his foot still on the rung. It's my fault, Jay, Carrie said, taking another step. I know that. Carrie, what are you doing? I hissed. Both of you, stay where you are. A hint of a smile crept onto Jay's face. Do we have a deal? I can't ever take it back, but I can't make up for it, Carrie said. It's not your fault. I know he drugged you. Do we have a deal? Jay repeated, his voice sharp. I love you, Dean, Carrie said, her eyes locked on Jay. Then she said, deal, and charged at him. Time seemed to screech to a halt. Carrie ran in slow motion, her tight blonde ponytail floating behind her as if gravity had no hold. I ran too, but I was steps behind too late. Carrie, barely 120 pounds, carrying a decade of shame and guilt, collided with Jay Pfizer, the 200-plus pound T-ball ref who'd killed before and thought he owned her. The force of their impact was more than the sum of their parts, 10 years of vengeance and redemption exploding under that sycamore tree. As their bodies twisted and fell, a wayward arm knocked Andrew from his stool. In that frozen moment, I had a choice. Grab Andrew before he fell or dive onto the pile to save Carrie. I don't remember deciding. All I know is I was suddenly holding Andrew, the rope tightening just enough to make him cough but not cut off his airway. I screamed for Carr to help Carrie. Then I heard two shots, one right after the other. Blood was everywhere. I thought Carr had missed and hit Carrie, but when Jay rolled onto his back, I saw the bullet holes, one in his chest, one in his stomach. I freed Andrew and knelt beside Carrie. Carr was applying pressure to a wound in her abdomen, a red stain spreading across her dress. When I heard her cry, it was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. She was alive. Yesterday, my world nearly ended. Today, things seem a little brighter, but we've got a long road ahead. I'm sitting in Carrie's hospital room with my laptop, watching her sleep. The knife pierced her large intestine, but missed major organs. So far, no signs of infection, and the doctors say with rest, she'll make a full recovery. I've replayed that moment before Andrew fell 1,000 times. My heart says if I'd chosen Carrie, she wouldn't have been stabbed. My brain says Andrew would have died if I had. I'm not sure I'll ever reconcile that choice, but I know how Carrie felt all those years, carrying her guilt. It's tough to look deep within, admit your sins, and seek redemption. That's what she did under that sycamore tree, and I'm proud of her. Andrew was returned to his father, unharmed. From what Ryan's told me, Andrew's dad doesn't believe any trauma, sexual or otherwise, occurred, so Andrew should be okay. That'll make Carrie happy when she wakes up. Once T-ball season starts again, the dads are already pushing for it. I need to sit down with Andrew's dad and explain what Jay's note meant. I hope he'll understand. Detective Carr visited this morning. Jay Pfizer is dead, of course. The community is in shock. Jay hid his true nature well. He used to be trim and clean-cut, but word is he'd let himself go the last couple of years. He was never an accountant. He'd applied at the town's only tax firm, but was rejected. He wasn't a mall Santa or Easter Bunny either, though Carr got that wrong. They did find wigs and face paint at 15 Franklin Drive, though. He had a thing for being a clown. They also found other strange stuff. Poems like the one sent to us, some on paper, some in magazine margins, some scrawled on walls. Carr's looking into the ones with names or identifying details, but I doubt I'll hear much about what he finds. We talked about 3 Orange Circle, too. Turns out, there was a body buried in a shallow grave, about 2 feet deep. It wasn't Susan Carrington. Carr chuckled when he saw my face, but it wasn't mirth in his eyes. It was bewilderment. In a town like ours, monsters like Jay are rare. They usually gravitate to bigger cities where they can blend in. I asked how he knew it wasn't Susan. Turns out she fractured her left arm badly in junior high cheerleading. Her dad, who Carr called despite hating to, confirmed it. A bad fracture leaves a mark, like a scar on the bone. The body in the basement had no such marks. I asked if Jay killed the woman and if we'd ever know what happened to Susan. Carr said he tried to identify the bones, but with Jay dead, we might never know the whole truth. Maybe that's for the best. Who knows how many people Jay terrorized or killed? There'll be an investigation, and people will wonder how we missed this monster. Maybe there'll be answers despite what Carr thinks, but I suspect most of them are buried in the dirt with Jay. The first night, it was just my flashlight. I could have sworn I left it right beside my sleeping bag, but when I jolted awake, heart hammering from yet another nightmare, it was clear across the tent. That's when I knew the forest wasn't going to let me off easy. I've never been the outdoorsy type, never had the urge to rough it in the wild. But after my therapist suggested I tackle my fears head-on, I figured a solo camping trip was the way to go. A chance to conquer my anxiety, to prove I could survive alone in the wilderness. Looking back, I wonder if I should have started smaller. Spiders, heights, anything but this vast, uncaring forest that seemed to swallow me whole the moment I stepped off the trail. I picked a spot far from the designated campgrounds, wanting to really test myself. The first day wasn't terrible. I managed to set up my tent without too much hassle, gathered some wood for a fire, and even found myself marveling at the sunset filtering through the trees, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. But as darkness crept in, the forest came alive with sounds I couldn't place, creaks, rustles, and distant snaps that made my skin prickle. Every twig that broke under some unseen weight had me jumping, every rustle in the undergrowth conjuring images of predators lurking just out of sight. Sleep barely came that first night, my mind caught in a loop of uneasy dreams. When I woke to find my flashlight moved, I brushed it off as my own forgetfulness. I was exhausted, stressed. Surely, I just misremembered where I'd placed it. The second day, I threw myself into keeping busy. I went for a short hike, carefully marking my path with small piles of stones to avoid getting lost. I gathered more firewood, practicing the knots I'd watched on YouTube videos before the trip. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across my campsite, I felt a flicker of pride. I was doing it. I was surviving. That night, I slept a bit better. The forest's chorus of noises, hoots, scurries, and the occasional far-off howl still set me on edge, but they felt less alien. I was adapting, I told myself. This was progress. But when I woke on the third morning, my stomach dropped. My water bottle, which I distinctly remembered placing by the tent's door, was now tucked inside my backpack. My jacket, which I'd left draped over my sleeping bag, was neatly folded at my feet. I sat up, my mind racing. Had I done this in my sleep? Was I sleepwalking? Or was someone? No, I couldn't let myself go there. I was alone out here. This was just my mind playing tricks, my anxiety weaving shadows into threats. I spent that day on high alert, jumping at every crack of a branch, every flutter of leaves. The feeling of being watched clung to me, heavy and unshakable. As night fell, I hesitated to close my eyes. What I find moved in the morning. I must have dozed off eventually, because I woke with a start in the pitch black of early morning. Something had roused me, a sound, faint but deliberate. I lay perfectly still, ears straining. There was a soft rustling outside the tent, followed by footsteps so light they were barely audible. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to shout, to confront whatever was out there, but fear glued my tongue to the roof of my mouth. The footsteps circled the tent, once, twice, then faded into the night. When dawn finally broke, I unzipped the tent with trembling hands. No footprints, no signs of anyone. But my camping stove, which I'd left outside by the fire pit, was now inside the tent, placed neatly at my feet. I should have left then. Should have packed up and hiked back to my car, anxiety be damned. But some stubborn part of me refused to quit. I'd come out here to face my fears, and I wasn't going to run at the first sign of trouble. The fourth day passed in a haze of paranoia. I found myself talking out loud, muttering reassurances to break the oppressive silence. "You're okay," I'd say, my voice sounding thin and unconvincing. "There's no one out here. You're alone." But the words felt less like comfort and more like a warning, as if the forest itself was mocking me. That night, I tried to stay awake. I sat up in my sleeping bag, flashlight gripped tightly, determined to catch whoever or whatever was messing with me. The forest was eerily quiet, no footsteps, no rustling, just the usual hum of crickets and the distant call of an owl. I must have nodded off at some point, because I woke to sunlight streaming through the tent's fabric. For a brief moment, relief washed over me. Nothing had happened. But then I saw it. My backpack had been emptied, its contents arranged in a perfect circle around my sleeping bag. In the center, spelled out with my granola bars, were the words, "You're never alone." I scrambled out of the tent, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The campsite looked untouched. No footprints, no signs of anyone having been there. Just my belongings arranged in that chilling message. I packed up in a frenzy, my hands shaking so badly I could barely tie my shoelaces. As I shouldered my backpack, a piece of paper fluttered to the ground. I didn't remember packing any paper. With trembling fingers, I unfolded it. In handwriting that looked disturbingly like my own, it read, "See you next time." I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like they'd give out. Ran until I hit the trail and then kept running. When I finally reached my car, I locked myself inside and broke down, great heaving sobs shaking my entire body. It's been weeks since that camping trip. I've replayed every moment in my mind, trying to rationalize it all. Maybe I sleepwalked. Maybe the isolation broke me, made me see things that weren't there. But deep down, I know better. Something was out there in those woods, something that watched me, toyed with me, wanted me to know I was never truly alone. I haven't told anyone the full story. How could I? They'd think I was losing it. Sometimes I think I am, but then I'll wake in the middle of the night, certain I've heard footsteps circling my bed, Or I'll come home to find something slightly out of place. A book shifted, a picture frame tilted just so. And always, there's that lingering feeling, like eyes boring into the back of my neck. No matter where I go, no matter what I do, I'm never truly alone. Whatever was in those woods followed me home. I went into that forest to face my fears. Instead, I found a terror that clings to me, a shadow that moves when I move. As I sit here writing this, I can't shake the sensation that someone's reading over my shoulder, their breath ghosting across my neck. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. I'm not afraid of being alone in the wilderness. Because now I know the truth, we're never alone. And that's the most terrifying thing of all. The moment I saw their neatly folded clothes at the edge of the cliff, I knew our camping trip had spiraled into a nightmare. My mind churned with possibilities, each more horrifying than the last, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of what had happened to our friends. It was supposed to be a fun couples getaway. My wife Lisa and I had been planning this trip with our best friends, Mark and Sarah, for months. We'd all been so consumed by our hectic lives, work, kids, endless responsibilities, that we desperately needed this escape. A long weekend in the wilderness, just the four of us like old times. We chose a remote spot in the mountains, far from the usual campgrounds. Mark had discovered it on one of his solo hikes and couldn't stop raving about the breathtaking views and the absolute solitude. It's like standing on top of the world, he'd said, his eyes alight with excitement. The hike to the campsite was grueling, heavy packs digging into our shoulders as we trudged through dense forest. But the effort was worth it. We emerged into a small clearing perched on the edge of a cliff, and the view was nothing short of spectacular. Miles of untouched wilderness stretching out before us, distant mountain peaks piercing a clear blue sky. We set up camp quickly, pitching our tents to face the panorama. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, we gathered around a campfire, cracking open beers and reminiscing about our college days. The laughter felt good, unburdened by the usual worries of waking kids or rushing to meetings. For a moment, it was just us, the crackling fire, and the vast open night. As the fire died down to glowing embers, Mark stood up, stretching. "I'm gonna grab some more firewood," he said, his voice casual. "Anyone want to come?" Sarah yawned, shaking her head. "I'm beat. Think I'll turn in." Lisa was already half asleep, her head resting on my shoulder, her breath soft and steady. I started to get up, but Mark waved me off with a grin. "No worries, man. I could use a little solo time. Won't be long." I watched as he grabbed his flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness as he disappeared into the forest. That was the last time I saw him. An hour passed then, too. The fire had gone out completely, leaving a chill that settled over the campsite like a heavy blanket. I shifted uneasily, glancing toward the tree line. "He should have been back by now," I said to Lisa, who had stirred awake, her eyes bleary with sleep. "Maybe he got turned around in the dark," she suggested, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her concern. We woke Sarah, and the three of us called out into the night, our voices echoing off the cliff face, unanswered. The only response was the rustle of leaves in the wind and the distant hoot of an owl. Worry gnawed at my gut. We decided to search. Lisa stayed at the campsite in case Mark returned, while Sarah and I ventured into the forest, our flashlights sweeping through the undergrowth as we called his name. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches like gnarled fingers reaching out from the shadows. Every rustle, every snap of a twig felt like a threat or a clue. After hours of fruitless searching, our throats hoarse from shouting, we trudged back to the campsite. Lisa's face fell when she saw us return alone. "Nothing?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. I shook my head, the weight of the situation pressing down on us all. We stayed up the rest of the night, taking turns calling out and searching the immediate area. Exhaustion and fear frayed our nerves, and as the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, we were snapping at each other, the stress bringing out our worst. "We need to get help," I said finally, my voice rough with fatigue. "I'll hike back to where we can get cell service and call the rangers." Sarah shook her head, her eyes wild. "We can't split up. What if something happened to Mark? It could happen to you too. We can't just sit here and do nothing." Lisa snapped, her eyes red from crying, her hands clenched into fists. That's when Sarah saw it, a flash of color at the edge of the cliff, just visible in the growing light. "What's that?" she asked, pointing. We approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing, just a pile of fabric. But as we got closer, dread sank into my bones. It was clothes, Mark and Sarah's clothes, folded neatly and placed with eerie care at the very edge of the cliff. Sarah let out a strangled cry, collapsing to her knees beside the pile. "No, no, no," she moaned, her hands hovering over the clothes as if afraid to touch them. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process the sight. There were Mark's favorite hiking boots, the ones he'd worn on countless adventures, scuffed and well-loved. Sarah's bright blue raincoat, the one she'd been so excited to break in on this trip. All their clothes, down to their socks and underwear, were arranged with a precision that felt wrong, almost obscene in its meticulousness. Lisa was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper, as if saying it too loudly would make it real. Did they jump? I forced myself to step closer to the edge, my heart thundering. The drop was dizzying, hundreds of feet down to jagged rocks and tangled trees below. I scanned the cliff face, the ground far beneath, searching for any sign of our friends, bodies, gear, anything. But there was nothing. No trace of them. "This doesn't make sense," I said, my voice sounding strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Why would they take off their clothes? And where are they?" We searched the area frantically, combing through the underbrush, checking behind every tree, looking for any clue, any explanation. But there was nothing. No note, no signs of a struggle, just the neatly folded clothes and the vast, indifferent wilderness around us. As the sun climbed higher, the reality of our situation sank in like a stone. Our friends were gone, vanished without a trace. We were alone in the mountains, miles from help, with no idea what had happened or whether we were in danger too. The hike back to civilization was a blur of fear and exhaustion. We left most of our gear behind, taking only what we needed to move quickly. None of us wanted to spend another night at that campsite, under the shadow of that cliff. The rangers were sympathetic but baffled. They organized search parties, brought in dogs and helicopters, and for days they scoured the area. But they found nothing, no bodies, no additional clues. It was as if Mark and Sarah had simply evaporated into the mountain air. In the weeks and months that followed, theories swirled. Some suggested they'd run off together, staging their disappearance, but those who knew them dismissed it outright. Mark and Sarah were happily married, devoted to each other and their kids. Others whispered about cults, secret government experiments, even alien abductions, each idea more outlandish than the last. But in the absence of facts, imaginations ran wild. Lisa and I tried to move on, to rebuild our lives, but the mystery clung to us like damp fog. We'd lie awake at night, replaying every moment of that trip, searching for some overlooked detail, some explanation that could make sense of the senseless. Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if we'll ever know the truth. Will a hiker, years from now, stumble across some piece of evidence that unravels the mystery? Or will Mark and Sarah remain one of those unsolved stories, a cautionary tale about the dangers lurking in the wild? Mostly, though, I think about that moment when I saw their clothes at the edge of the cliff, that instant when our world tilted, when the line between the known and the unknown blurred into something unrecognizable. I think about how fragile that line is, how easily we can step from the safe and familiar into a realm of uncertainty and terror. And on nights when the wind howls and the shadows seem to shift of their own accord, I wonder, what if it wasn't just Mark and Sarah who disappeared that night? What if, in some way we can't yet comprehend, we all did? What if the 4 people who returned from that mountain aren't quite the same as those who ascended it? These are dangerous thoughts, the kind that can drive you mad if you linger on them too long. So I try to focus on the present, on the tangible world around me. But always, in the back of my mind, there's that image, neatly folded clothes at the edge of a cliff, and the vast, unknown wilderness beyond. The moment I saw the figure in the photograph, my blood ran cold. There, in the background of what should have been a serene landscape shot, was a shadowy silhouette watching me. As I flipped through the images, a horrifying realization dawned. It wasn't just in one photo. The figure was in almost every shot, getting closer each time. I've been a nature photographer for over a decade, specializing in wildlife and remote landscapes. This trip was supposed to be routine, a week-long solo excursion into the heart of the Alaskan wilderness to capture the raw beauty of an untouched forest. I'd done dozens of trips like this before, always alone, always pushing deeper into the wild in search of that perfect shot. The journey began like any other. I flew into a small town on the edge of the wilderness, rented a rugged 4x4, and drove as far as the dirt roads would take me. From there, it was a 2-day hike to my chosen campsite, a small clearing near a pristine lake I'd scouted on satellite images. The trek was arduous, my heavy pack weighing on my shoulders, but the anticipation of solitude kept me moving. As I set up camp that first evening, the forest buzzed with life, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, the occasional splash of fish in the lake. I breathed deeply, savoring the crisp, clean air, the kind that fills your lungs with a sense of freedom. This was where I felt most alive, most connected to the world around me. For the next few days, I explored the area, my camera always within reach. I captured misty mornings over the lake, sunlight filtering through ancient pines, and even a few shots of a moose and her calf grazing at the water's edge. The days were perfect, each frame a testament to the wild's untouched beauty. It wasn't until the fourth night that I felt the first inkling something was wrong. I was reviewing the day's shots on my camera's small screen, the glow illuminating my tent, when I noticed a dark blur in the corner of one image. At first, I dismissed it as a smudge on the lens or maybe a bird caught mid-flight. But as I zoomed in, my heart stuttered. The blur had a distinctly human shape, standing among the trees, its posture suggesting it was watching me. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a shadow playing tricks. Shaking off the unease, I flipped to the next photo. There it was again, the same figure, but slightly closer, its form more defined against the backdrop of the forest. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the rest of the day's shots. In nearly every landscape photo, the figure was there, always watching, always edging nearer. Some images showed it half hidden behind a tree. Others had it standing openly in the distance, its silhouette unmistakable. I burst out of my tent, flashlight beams slicing through the dark, sweeping across the tree line. I half expected to see the figure standing there, but the forest was still, silent except for the usual nighttime chorus. Nothing, just the indifferent wilderness staring back at me. Sleep eluded me that night. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves had me sitting upright, clutching my flashlight, my eyes straining against the darkness. By dawn, I was exhausted, my nerves frayed. I spent the fifth day in a state of hypervigilance, constantly scanning my surroundings as I took photos. My camera felt heavier in my hands, each click of the shutter laced with dread. But I saw no sign of anyone else. No footprints, no broken branches, no evidence of another soul in this remote stretch of wilderness. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lake, I reluctantly returned to my campsite, dreading what I might find when I reviewed the day's images. With trembling fingers, I turned on my camera. The first few shots were clear, stunning landscapes unmarred by any mysterious figures. I began to relax, convincing myself the previous day's photos had been some strange anomaly, a glitch in my tired mind. Then I reached the last photo of the day, a shot of my campsite taken from a small hill overlooking the clearing. My breath caught in my throat. There, standing just outside my tent, was the figure. It was still indistinct, more silhouette than substance, but unmistakably human-shaped and undeniably real. Its posture was rigid, as if it had been waiting for me to notice it. Panic surged through me. I scrambled out of the tent, my flashlight and knife in hand, eyes darting wildly around the campsite. But there was no one there. No footprints, no signs of disturbance, just my gear exactly as I'd left it. I was alone in the wilderness. Or at least, I appeared to be. That night was the longest of my life. I sat with my back against a tree, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, watching the darkness for any sign of movement. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every sound felt like the approach of my unseen watcher. My eyes burned with fatigue, but I couldn't let myself sleep. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, I made my decision. I had to leave. Whatever was happening, whoever or whatever was out there, I couldn't stay another night. I broke camp in a frenzy, shoving gear into my backpack with little care for order. As I worked, I kept glancing over my shoulder, unable to shake the feeling of eyes on me, boring into my back. Just before I left, on an impulse I couldn't quite explain, I raised my camera and took one final photo of the campsite, the lens capturing the tent, the lake, and the surrounding trees bathed in early morning light. The hike back to my vehicle was a blur of paranoia and adrenaline. Every snapping twig had me whirling around. Every shadow in my peripheral vision seemed to shift and move. I made the 2-day journey in one, practically running at times, driven by a primal fear I'd never known before. When I finally reached my rental car, parked at the edge of the dirt road, I nearly collapsed with relief. I threw my gear in a back and peeled out, the tires kicking up dust as I sped toward pavement. It wasn't until I checked into a motel in the nearest town that I allowed myself to relax, if only slightly. Sitting on the edge of the bed, my body aching from the frantic hike, I pulled out my camera. With a deep breath, I turned it on and navigated to the last photo I'd taken at one of my campsite just before I left. For a long moment, I stared at the image, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. There, clear as day, was a figure standing inside my tent. It was looking directly at the camera, its face a blurred mess of shadows, but its posture unmistakably confrontational, as if challenging me to acknowledge its presence. It was inside my tent, in the exact spot where I had been standing when I took the photo. I dropped the camera, scrambling backward on the bed until my back hit the wall. This was impossible. I had been alone. I had taken that photo myself, standing in the clearing, with no one else around. There was no way someone could have been in my tent without me seeing them. Yet the evidence was undeniable, staring back at me from the camera's screen. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a chair facing the motel door, jumping at every creak from the parking lot outside, my knife clutched tightly in my hand. When morning came, I checked out and started the long drive back to civilization, my mind reeling. I've been home for a week now, but I still can't shake the feeling of being watched. I've gone over the photos countless times, searching for some logical explanation, a glitch, a trick of the light, anything. But there's nothing. The figure is there, getting closer in each shot, until it was right behind me in my own tent. I haven't told anyone about this. How could I? They think I was losing my mind. Sometimes I think I am, but then I look at those photos again, and I know what I experienced was real. I've been a nature photographer for over a decade, but now I'm not sure I can ever go back into the wilderness. The forest, once my sanctuary, now feels like a trap. I know something was out there, watching me, following me, closing in with every step. And I have no idea what would have happened if I'd stayed one more night. Every time I pick up my camera now, I hesitate. What will I see when I review the photos? Will there be a figure in the background, watching me from the shadows of my own home? I've started avoiding mirrors and reflective surfaces, terrified of catching a glimpse of something or someone standing behind me. The wilderness has always been my passion, my escape from the noise of the world. But now I know the truth, we're never truly alone out there. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones we can't see until it's too late. I don't know if I'll ever take another photo without fear, or step into the woods without constantly looking over my shoulder. But one thing I do know, whatever was out there, whatever was watching and following me, it's not done with me yet. And that thought keeps me awake at night, staring into the shadows, waiting for a figure to emerge from the darkness. I've never been one to believe in ghosts or anything paranormal. Growing up, I'd roll my eyes whenever someone brought up haunted houses or spirits. I was the practical one, always searching for the logical explanation. That all changed after living in that house on Maple Street in Willow Creek. I was 16 when I moved there with my mom, Gabriella, and my stepdad, Ricardo. At first, the house seemed normal enough, just a typical suburban home with 3 bedrooms, a decent-sized kitchen, and a basement that always felt a bit too cold. Nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary. Or so I thought. The first few weeks were uneventful. We unpacked, settled in, and went about our lives like any normal family. Then the noises started. They were subtle at first, just bumps and creaks I brushed off as the house settling. Old houses make noise, right? That's what I kept telling myself. But soon, the noises became more distinct, more deliberate. I'd be lying in bed at night, scrolling through my phone or trying to sleep, when I'd hear it, a solid thump against my bedroom wall. It wasn't like something falling or the house shifting. It was like someone was hitting the wall with a closed fist. Sometimes it happened once, sometimes 3 or 4 times in a row. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was probably the pipes or maybe branches from a tree outside hitting the house during windy nights. But there was no tree outside my window, and the thumps came even on perfectly still nights. After a few weeks, the thumps started coming from my ceiling too. Same sound, like a fist slamming down. I jump out of bed and check the attic access in the hallway, but it was always closed, undisturbed. Ricardo even went up there a couple of times to check, but he found nothing, no animals, no loose boards, nothing that could explain it. I started having trouble sleeping, lying awake, waiting for the next thump, my heart racing every time I heard something. I didn't want to seem like a scared kid, so I didn't tell Mom or Ricardo how much it was bothering me. I just mentioned I heard some noises sometimes, and they echoed my initial thought, old house, settling noises, nothing to worry about. But then something happened that none of us could explain away. One evening, Mom and I were in the living room, watching TV and chatting. Ricardo was working late, so it was just the two of us. We were having a normal conversation when we both heard it, a loud clatter from the kitchen, like someone had knocked a bunch of silverware onto the floor. We froze, looking at each other. I could tell Mom was thinking the same thing I was. Had someone broken in? We got up together, Mom grabbing her phone, ready to call 911 if needed. We crept to the kitchen, but it was empty. No one was there. Then we saw it. On the floor in the hallway, a good 7 or 8 feet from the kitchen, was a brownie knife. Not just any knife, but the one that had been sitting in the brownie pan on the counter. We'd made brownies earlier that day, and I distinctly remembered leaving the knife in the pan after cutting them. There was no way it could have fallen off the counter and ended up that far down the hallway. It would have had to travel around the kitchen island, make a 90-degree turn, and slide halfway down the hall. It wasn't physically possible. Mom and I stood there, staring at it. Finally, she picked it up and put it in the sink, trying to laugh it off. Maybe the cat knocked it over, she said, but we both knew our cat was asleep on the couch in the living room the whole time. Even if the cat had done it, there was no way the knife could have ended up that far away. That was the first time I saw genuine fear in Mom's eyes, and it scared me more than the incident itself. If she was scared, my practical, no-nonsense mom who never believed in anything supernatural, then maybe there really was something to be afraid of. After that night, things escalated. The thumping in my room grew more frequent and louder, sometimes happening in broad daylight while I was doing homework. I'd hear 3 distinct knocks, almost like someone was trying to get my attention. I'd freeze, waiting to see if it would happen again, and sometimes it did, 3 more knocks in the same rhythm. I started spending less time in my room, doing my homework at the kitchen table or hanging out in the living room until I was so tired I'd fall asleep immediately. Anything to avoid being alone in my room, awake and aware of what was happening around me. Eventually, I graduated high school and moved out for college. I thought whatever was happening would stay behind with the house, and for a while, it seemed like it had. I didn't experience anything strange in my dorm or my first apartment. But whenever I went home to visit, it would start again. The thumps, the knocks, the feeling of being watched. I'd sleep on the couch instead of my old room, making excuses about the living room being cooler or the couch being more comfortable than my old bed. Ricardo started using my old room as an office after I moved out, and occasionally he'd sleep there if Mom was sick and he didn't want to disturb her. One weekend, over breakfast, he casually mentioned hearing the same thumping noises I used to complain about. "I thought you were just being a dramatic teenager," he said, trying to laugh it off, "but it woke me up at like 3 a.m. last night. 3 loud thumps on the wall, right by the headboard." Mom gave him a look I couldn't quite read, and I got the sense they'd talked about this before when I wasn't around. "What did you do?" I asked. Ricardo shrugged. I was half asleep and annoyed, so I just said out loud, "What do you want?" Kind of joking, you know. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. And he hesitated. Nothing for a minute. Then the room got so cold I could see my breath. In July, Victoria. I could see my breath in July. We didn't talk about it anymore that weekend, but I noticed Mom and Ricardo seemed on edge. They'd glance toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms whenever a floorboard creaked or the house made a normal settling noise. A few weeks later, Mom called me late at night, 11:30 p.m., which was unusual because she never calls that late. I knew something was wrong as soon as I saw her name on my phone screen. "Victoria," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "something happened tonight." I don't know how to explain it. My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Are you okay?" "Is Ricardo okay?" "We're fine physically." "We're fine," she said, taking a deep breath. I was in bed, almost asleep. Ricardo was snoring away next to me, and I heard it. Someone whispered my name, clear as day, right next to the bed. I thought maybe Ricardo had woken up, so I rolled over to check. She paused so long I thought the call had dropped. "Mom? You there?" There was someone there, Victoria. Not Ricardo. A tiny Asian woman, kneeling right next to the bed, staring at me. My blood ran cold. "What did you do?" I asked. That's the weird part. I wasn't even scared in the moment. I just looked at her, and she looked at me, and then I rolled back over and went to sleep like it was the most normal thing in the world. It wasn't until I woke up this morning that I realized how messed up it was. Who does that? Who sees a stranger in their bedroom and just goes back to sleep? I didn't have an answer. All I could think was that whatever was in that house had the power to make people act irrationally, to make the abnormal seem normal in the moment. The incidents kept happening. Ricardo was doing laundry one day and reached for the laundry chute handle. At the same moment, he saw a translucent hand reaching for it too. He said he jumped back so fast he nearly fell down the stairs. My younger brother, Josh, who was still living at home, woke up one morning to find what he described as a see-through lady kneeling at the foot of his bed, like she was praying. He said he wasn't scared, just confused. And when he sat up to get a better look, she vanished. My sister, Emily, who sometimes stayed in the guest room when she visited with her kids, told me she woke up early one morning and saw a tall, dark figure of a man standing in her doorway. She thought it was Ricardo at first, but when she called out to him, the figure didn't move or respond. She turned on the lamp, and no one was there. She got up to check, and Ricardo and Mom were both fast asleep in their bedroom. I started to dread going home. I'd make excuses about being too busy with school or work, anything to avoid spending the night in that house. When I did visit, I'd leave before dark. My family noticed, of course, but they understood. They were living with it day in and day out, but at least they had each other. I couldn't imagine being alone in that house. The worst experience happened about 2 years ago during the holidays. I'd finally worked up the courage to spend a night for Christmas Eve. We had a nice dinner, opened a few presents, and stayed up late talking. Everything felt normal, and I started to think maybe whatever was happening had stopped. I was sleeping in my old room, telling myself it would be fine. I left the hallway light on, and my door cracked open, like a kid afraid of the dark. I managed to fall asleep around midnight, exhausted from the drive and holiday preparations. I woke up suddenly, that feeling you get when you know someone's watching you. The room was freezing cold. I could see my breath in the dim light from the hallway. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:14 a.m. As I lay there, trying to calm my racing heart, I heard it. 3 distinct knocks on the wall above my head, then 3 more, then silence. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or call out. The knocking started again, this time on the ceiling. 3 knocks, paused, 3 knocks, moving around the room like whatever was making the noise was circling above me. Then I felt it, a pressure on the bed beside me, like someone sitting down on the edge of the mattress. The blanket pulled slightly, tugging away from my shoulders. I still couldn't move, couldn't scream, could barely breathe. A whisper came right next to my ear, "Victoria." The voice was soft, feminine, with an accent I couldn't place. Not threatening, not malicious, but definitely not Mom or Emily's voice. The pressure on the bed shifted, moving closer. I felt something cold brush against my cheek, like fingers but not quite solid. That broke my paralysis. I screamed and bolted upright, fumbling for the lamp. My hands were shaking so badly I knocked it over, sending it crashing to the floor. By the time Mom and Ricardo burst into the room, I was huddled against the headboard, sobbing uncontrollably. There was nothing in the room with me, nothing they could see anyway, but the cold remained. Everyone could feel it, could see their breath hanging in the air. Ricardo checked the vents, the windows, looking for any source of the cold. There was nothing. Mom sat with me, holding me while I cried, telling me it was just a bad dream, but we both knew it wasn't. I left the next morning and haven't spent another night in that house since. My family still lives there. They say they've gotten used to the strange occurrences, that whatever or whoever is in the house doesn't seem to want to harm them. Mom even talks about the little Asian lady sometimes, like she's just another member of the household. I don't understand how they can live like that. I try to get them to move, but they always have reasons to stay. The housing market's bad, they like the neighborhood, they've put too much work into the house to leave. I wonder sometimes if the house itself is somehow keeping them there, making them rationalize staying despite everything. The last time I visited, about a month ago, I was helping Mom with the dishes after lunch. Everyone else was in the living room watching a game. As we stood side by side at the sink, Mom washing and me drying, she suddenly went very still. "Victoria," she whispered, not looking at me. "Don't turn around," but she's standing right behind us. I felt the familiar cold creep up my spine, saw goosebumps rise on my arms. Mom kept washing dishes like nothing was happening, her movements mechanical, her eyes fixed straight ahead. I wanted to run, to scream, to do something, but I found myself mimicking her, drying the same plate over and over, too afraid to turn and see what she was seeing. After what felt like forever, but was probably only a minute, Mom relaxed. "She's gone now," she said, like she was commenting on the weather. I put down the dish towel with shaking hands. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you need to move. This isn't normal. This isn't okay." She just smiled at me, that same sad smile she's been giving me for years. "It's just the house, Victoria. It's just how it is. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to help them. All I know is that I'll never spend another night in that house, and I live in constant fear that one day I'll get a call telling me something has happened to them, something worse than knocks on the wall or whispered names in the dark. If anyone has dealt with something similar or has any advice, I'd appreciate it. I feel like I'm going crazy sometimes, like maybe I imagined everything. But then I talk to my siblings, and they've seen things too. We can't all be imagining the same things, can we?" It's been 3 years since we moved out of that house on Maple Street in Ravenwood, but I can't stop thinking about it. My wife, Isabella, tells me I need to let it go, but how can I when I still don't have answers? It was supposed to be our dream home. We've been married just 6 months when we found it. A gorgeous 2-story Victorian built in 1910, with all the original woodwork, stained glass windows, and a library with built-in bookshelves that made my heart race the moment I saw it. The price was surprisingly reasonable for such a grand old place, especially with the housing market being so tight. The real estate agent kept emphasizing what a steal it was, a once-in-a-lifetime deal. The day we got the keys was unusually cold for April. Isabella was buzzing with excitement all morning, planning where our furniture would go and talking about paint colors for the walls. I remember feeling a strange mix of excitement and dread as we pulled up to the curb. That's when I saw it for the first time, a hand pulling back the lace curtain in the upstairs window, like someone was watching for us. "Did you see that?" I asked Isabella, pointing to the window. She followed my gaze but shook her head. "See what?" "There was someone up there, looking out the window." Isabella laughed. "Maybe it's the previous owners. They're probably still grabbing the last of their things." That made sense, so I didn't think too much of it. We got out of the car and I called out, "Hello? Anyone home?" No answer. I tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. When we got to the front door, I noticed the key was stuck at the bottom of the realtor's envelope. I had to shake it hard to get it to fall out. The heavy brass key was cold in my palm, and I had trouble getting it into the lock, like it didn't quite fit. After jiggling it a bit, the lock finally turned with a loud clunk that echoed through the empty house. The door swung open with a long, theatrical creak. I'll never forget the silence that greeted us. It was that weird kind of quiet that feels louder than noise, like the house was holding its breath. "Hello." I called again, stepping over the threshold. My voice bounced off the walls and came back to me. The house was completely empty. Isabella pushed past me, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. "Maybe they left through the back door," she said. We did a quick sweep of the house, but there was no one there. No boxes, no leftover belongings, nothing to suggest anyone had been there recently. The upstairs window where I'd seen the hand was closed and locked from the inside. "You must have seen a reflection or something," Isabella said, squeezing my hand. I nodded, but I knew what I'd seen. It wasn't a reflection. It was a hand, pale and slender, pulling back that curtain. That evening, our friend helped us move in our stuff. Everyone commented on how lucky we were to find such a beautiful old home. The grand staircase with its carved newel posts, the stained glass transom windows, the original crown molding. It was like stepping back in time. The house had a presence to it, like it was aware we were there. It wasn't until our friends left and we were alone that I noticed the photo album on the built-in shelf in the library. It definitely wasn't ours, and I was sure it hadn't been there earlier when we did our walkthrough. "Izzy," I called, "did you put this here?" She came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "But where?" I showed her the leather-bound album. We sat on the floor among our unpacked boxes and opened it. Inside were photos of the house from different eras, the 1920s, 40s, 70s, and more recent ones. There were photos of different families posing on the same porch we just walked across, sitting in the same bay window that was now in our living room. The last page had a newspaper clipping, dated just 3 weeks earlier, the day we signed the papers for the house. The headline read, "Local couple dies in highway accident." The photo showed our house, and the article explained that the previous owners, the Richardsons, had been killed in a head-on collision just hours after signing the papers to sell their home. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. "Did you know about this?" I asked Isabella. She shook her head, her face pale. "The realtor never mentioned it. They died the same day we bought this place," I said quietly. Isabella took the album from me and closed it. "It's sad, but it has nothing to do with us. It was an accident." She put the album back on the shelf, and we tried to forget about it as we unpacked, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I turned around, I expected to see someone standing there, but the rooms were always empty. That first night, the noises started. At first, it was just the normal settling sounds an old house makes, creaks and pops as the temperature dropped. But around 2 a.m., I woke up to what sounded like furniture being dragged across the floor upstairs. It was so loud and distinct that I sat straight up in bed. "What the hell?" I whispered. Isabella stirred beside me. "What's wrong? Don't you hear that?" I asked as another scraping sound came from above us. She sat up too, listening. "It's probably just the house settling." Old houses make noise, but this wasn't settling. This was deliberate movement, like someone was rearranging furniture in the attic. I grabbed my phone for a flashlight and got out of bed. "Where are you going?" Isabella asked, clutching the blanket. "To check it out." "Mason, no. It's nothing," but I had to see for myself. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, wincing as each step creaked loudly beneath my feet. The upstairs hallway was dark except for the beam from my phone. The sound had stopped, but I could feel something in the air, a heaviness like the atmosphere before a storm. I checked each room, the guest bedroom, the office, the bathroom, but everything was exactly as we'd left it. When I got to the pull-down attic stairs, I hesitated. The idea of climbing up into that dark space made my skin crawl, but I needed to know. I pulled the cord, and the stairs unfolded with a groan. I aimed my light up into the darkness, but couldn't see much. Taking a deep breath, I climbed up. The attic was empty except for some old insulation and a few forgotten items from previous owners. An old mirror, some Christmas decorations, a child's rocking horse covered in dust. Nothing had been moved. Nothing could explain the sounds we'd heard. When I got back to bed, Isabella was already asleep. I lay awake until morning, listening to the house breathe around me. The next day, I was unpacking books in the library when I found another newspaper clipping that had fallen behind one of the shelves. This one was much older, yellowed with age. It mentioned that the house had once been the Catholic Church rectory until 1956, when it was sold to a private owner following some kind of scandal. According to the article, the house had been built by the local timber company owner, but there had been improprieties in the construction contract with the church. The priests who had lived there were reassigned to a mission in Mozambique. Over the next few weeks, strange occurrences became our new normal. The house constantly produced creaks, thumps, and leaks. Often, I'd be working in my office when Isabella would come upstairs to ask what I was doing making such noise, only to find me quietly reading. Other times, I'd hear her moving around in the kitchen, only to call down and get no response, then find the kitchen empty when I checked. The worst was the tapping. It would start as a subtle sound against the wall while we lay in bed. Tap, 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 always in threes. Then it would move to another wall, like something was circling our room. Isabella started sleeping with earplugs. One night, I woke up to the sound of rhythmic thumping on the wooden steps leading to the second floor. Thump paused, like someone slowly climbing the stairs one at a time. Isabella was fast asleep beside me. I lay perfectly still, listening as the footsteps reached the top of the stairs and started down the hallway toward our bedroom. The floor outside our door creaked, and I saw the doorknob slowly turn. My heart was pounding, so hard I could hear my pulse in my ears. The door opened just a crack, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness beyond. Then it closed again, and the footsteps retreated down the hall. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. We tried to rationalize it all. Old pipes, the house settling, wind in the chimney, but deep down, I knew it was something else. The house wasn't just old. It was inhabited by something other than us. When friends would visit and hear the noises, they looked confused or startled. I started putting my finger to my lips and whispering shh, choosing not to explain. What could I say that wouldn't make me sound crazy? Oh, that's just our ghost rearranging furniture again. Isabella wanted to have a housewarming party to fill the place with light and laughter, thinking it might change the energy. The day of the party, I was hanging string lights in the backyard when I glanced up at the house and saw a face in the upstairs window, our bedroom window. It wasn't Isabella. She was at the store buying last-minute supplies. This face was gone, with hollow eyes staring down at me. When I blinked, it was gone. Inside, everything seemed normal, but when I went upstairs to change for the party, I found all the dresser drawers in our bedroom open, clothes spilling out. The closet door was open too, and my suits had been pulled off their hangers and thrown on the floor. I called out for Isabella, thinking maybe she'd come home early, but there was no answer. I quickly picked everything up and closed the drawers, not wanting to tell Isabella when she got home. She was already on edge about the house. This would just make it worse. The party went surprisingly well. The house seemed to behave itself with so many people there. No strange noises, no cold spots, no feeling of being watched. For a few hours, it felt like a normal home. But after everyone left and we were cleaning up, Isabella dropped a glass in the kitchen. As it shattered on the floor, all the lights in the house flickered, and we heard a long, low moan that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaking. Isabella nodded, her eyes wide. "What was that?" "Probably just the electrical," I said, not believing it myself. As we went to bed that night, the thumping on the stairs started again. Thump, pause. Isabella clutched my arm. "Mason, I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "There's something wrong with this house." I nodded, finally admitting what I'd known all along. "We'll start looking for a new place tomorrow." But the house wasn't going to let us go that easily. In the middle of the night, I woke up to find Isabella's side of the bed empty. I could hear water running somewhere. "Izzy," I called, getting out of bed. I followed the sound to the bathroom, but it was empty. The water was coming from downstairs. I hurried down to find all the faucets in the kitchen on full blast, water overflowing from the sink onto the floor. And there was Isabella, standing in the middle of the flood, staring blankly at the wall. "Isabella," I shouted, wading through the water to reach her. "What are you doing?" She turned to me slowly, her eyes unfocused. "They won't leave," she said in a voice that didn't sound like her own. "They say this is their home." I shut off the faucets and grabbed her by the shoulders. "Izzy, wake up. You're sleepwalking." She blinked several times, then looked around in confusion. "Why am I in the kitchen? Why is there water everywhere?" We spent the rest of the night in the car, parked in the driveway. Isabella didn't remember anything, not turning on the faucets, not what she'd said. By morning, we decided to move out as soon as possible. We found an apartment across town and started packing that day. As we were loading the last of our things into the moving truck, I took one final walk through the house. In the library, I noticed the photo album was back on the shelf, even though I was sure we'd packed it. I opened it to find new photos had been added, photos of us. Isabella and me on moving day, us at the housewarming party, me hanging lights in the backyard, and the final photo. Isabella standing in the flooded kitchen, her eyes vacant, water up to her ankles. I slammed the album shut and ran for the house, not looking back. We've been in our new place for 3 years now. A modern apartment with no history, no strange noises, no feeling of being watched. But sometimes I find myself driving past the old house when I'm in that neighborhood. I can't help it. It's like the house is calling me back. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I see a familiar face in the upstairs window, pale fingers pulling back the lace curtain. I still don't have an explanation for what happened in that house. All I know is that some places have memories, and some memories don't want to be forgotten. Whatever was in that house, whether it was the spirits of the Richardsons, the disgraced priest, or something older and darker, they wanted us to know we were never alone there. And sometimes late at night, when our apartment is quiet, I swear I can still hear it. Tap, 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 like it followed us home. I've never shared this with anyone outside my family and closest friends. Even now, 5 years later, my hands are shaking as I type this out. I'm hoping someone out there might have experienced something similar or can help me make sense of what happened that night in my apartment in Maplewood. For context, I'm a single mom. Back then, my son Ethan was only 4, and we lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in an older building. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. I had my dog Max, a super chill lab mix, and a kitten named Luna, who was about 6 months old at the time. The weird stuff started gradually. At first, it was just little things I brushed off. You know how it is, you hear noise and think it's the neighbors or the building settling. But over time, it became impossible to ignore. It started with doors closing by themselves, not slamming, just gently shutting when no one was near them. Then came the voices. They were always too quiet to make out actual words, but sometimes, when I was alone while Ethan was at preschool, I'd hear what sounded like whispered conversations from the hallway or kitchen. A check, of course, but no one was ever there. The footsteps were what really started to freak me out. Late at night, after Ethan was asleep, I'd hear what sounded exactly like someone walking quickly across our living room. The first few times, I grabbed my taser and checked the whole apartment, thinking someone had broken in. Nothing. Always nothing. Then the electronics started acting up. The TV would turn on by itself at random times. My phone would suddenly start playing music, even though I hadn't touched it. The microwave would beep in the middle of the night. Once, all the lights in the apartment flashed on and off for about 5 seconds before returning to normal. The thing with Max, my dog, was probably the weirdest part of the early activity. Sometimes he'd just sit there, and his fur would indent, like someone was petting him, but no one was there. He never seemed scared during these moments, just confused, looking around like, who's doing that? Other times, he'd suddenly yelp and jump away from nothing, like someone had slapped him or stepped on his tail. I tried to rationalize everything. Bad wiring for the electronics, settling building for the noises, overactive imagination for the voices, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Things escalated over about 3 months. I talked to my landlord, who basically said the building was old, but there was nothing wrong with it. No history, no previous complaints. He checked the wiring and said everything was fine. I even had a friend who was into paranormal stuff come over with some equipment, but they didn't catch anything significant. Just a few unusual energy readings, whatever that means. Then came that Saturday night I'll never forget. It was January 14th. I had decorated for Christmas late that year. Hadn't taken everything down yet. I still had jingle bells on the front door, those decorative ones that chime when the door opens or closes. It was around 1:30 a.m. Ethan was at his dad's for the weekend, thank God, and I was in the bathroom getting ready for bed. Max and Luna were in the living room. I could see them through the open bathroom door, just chilling on a couch. Suddenly, the jingle bells on my front door went absolutely wild. Not like someone had gently opened the door, but like someone had violently flung it open and then slammed it shut. The sound was deafening in the quiet apartment. My heart nearly stopped. Someone was breaking in. I was 100% certain of it. At the same instant, Max and Luna completely changed. Max, the friendliest dog you'd ever meet, started snarling like I'd never heard before, his hackles raised, staring at the front door. Luna was worse, her back arched completely, her fur standing on end, hissing and spitting. I'd never seen either of them act like this. I grabbed my pocket taser from the bathroom counter. Being a single woman in an apartment, I always kept it close. I'm only 5 feet 2 inches and pretty small, but adrenaline was pumping through me like crazy. All I could think was, protect my home. I rushed out of the bathroom, taser raised, ready to confront whoever had broken in. But what I saw made me freeze. There was nobody at the door. It was still locked, deadbolt, and chain in place. But the heavy decorative tray from my coffee table was now on the floor across the room, like someone had thrown it. Every single cabinet in my kitchen was open, every single one. All the side table drawers were open too. And the weirdest thing, my 2 bar stools at the kitchen counter were spinning, not just wobbling, but spinning in opposite directions. They had been completely still moments before. I stood there, unable to move, trying to process what I was seeing. That's when I heard it, a low grunt, right in my ear, like someone breathing out hard in frustration. It was so close I could feel the warmth of it. I swung around with my taser, screaming, "Get out!" But there was nothing there. Absolutely nothing. Max was now backed into a corner, still growling, his eyes darting around the room like he was tracking something moving that I couldn't see. Luna had run under the couch. I was terrified but also angry. This was my home. Whatever was happening, I needed it to stop. I walked through the apartment, checking every corner, looking behind furniture, still holding my taser. Everything had stopped moving, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. After checking everywhere and finding nothing, I decided I needed to calm down. I hoped a hot shower would help clear my head so I could figure out what to do next. I brought Luna into the bathroom with me. She loved water and would often sit between the shower curtain and liner while I showered, and Max lay down right outside the door where I could see him. I'd been in the shower maybe 3 minutes when I felt it through the shower curtain. It felt exactly like an arm pushing against the plastic, reaching for me. Not like the curtain billowing from steam, but a solid form pressing through it. I could even make out what looked like fingers pressing against the curtain. I slapped at it hard, shouting, "Stop it!" That's when everything went crazy. The entire shower curtain and rod were violently ripped down, all 12 hooks popping off simultaneously. The curtain fell into the tub with me, and Luna screeched and jumped out of the bathroom. Max, my sweet, calm dog, started growling and snarling again, then turned and ran out of the bathroom too. I didn't even think, I just reacted. I didn't grab a towel, didn't turn off the water. I just ran, soaking wet and naked, into the living room. Everything was moving. The bar stools were spinning again, faster this time. A Polaroid camera I had on a shelf was floating about 4 inches off the surface. The leashes hanging by the door were swinging violently, like someone was shaking them. The TV turned on, then off, then on again, cycling through channels. I stood there, dripping wet, unable to scream, unable to move. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, though it felt like forever. Then, as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The silence was deafening. For a split second, I thought it was over. Then the 20-pound container of pet food flipped over by itself, spilling kibble everywhere, and in perfect synchronization, every single water faucet in the apartment turned on full blast. Kitchen sink, bathtub. I ran to Ethan's room and threw on some of my clothes I'd folded on his bed earlier. I grabbed Max's leash, scooped up Luna, and we got the hell out of there. I didn't even put on shoes. We sat in my car in the parking lot until morning. When daylight came, I forced myself to go back inside. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Shower curtain down, water everywhere from the faucets I hadn't turned off, pet food scattered across the floor. It wasn't a dream or a hallucination. I called a different friend who knew about paranormal stuff. She came over with some sage, crystals, and whatever else. She said the energy in the apartment was dark and angry. We did a cleansing ritual. It didn't help. Over the next few weeks, I had 3 different paranormal investigation teams come through. They all caught EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, temperature drops, and one even got a photo of what looked like a dark shadow standing in my hallway when nobody was there. They all said my apartment had something negative attached to it, but nobody could tell me what it was or why it was there. I tried everything. More cleansings, religious blessings, mediums. Nothing worked. The activity continued and sometimes escalated. After 2 more months of this, I broke my lease and moved out. I couldn't live there anymore, and I definitely couldn't have Ethan there. The weird thing is, nothing followed us to the new place. Whatever it was, it stayed in that apartment. I've looked into the building's history since then and found nothing unusual. No deaths, no tragedies, nothing that would explain what happened. To this day, I don't know what was in my apartment that night. I don't know why it targeted us or what it wanted. All I know is that small apartment in Maplewood was the scariest place I've ever been. I still have nightmares about those bar stools spinning in my kitchen and the feeling of something pushing through my shower curtain to touch me. I just want to understand what happened. Has anyone experienced anything like this? Does anyone have any insight? Because 5 years later, I still check behind shower curtains and flinch when I hear jingle bells. I've never told anyone the full story of what happened in Penn Haven because it sounds insane, even to me. But it's been 3 years since we left, and I still wake up some nights feeling something sitting at the edge of my bed. I need to get this out. We bought the house in Penn Haven because it was a good deal. Too good, looking back. It was a simple 2-bedroom ranch-style house with a detached garage that had been converted into a small gas station servicing the rural community. Nathan was excited about the business opportunity, and I loved the charming wood floors and the big bay window in the living room, which let in soft, golden light in the afternoons. The real estate agent mentioned the previous owner had been eccentric but glossed over the details. We were young and in love. What did we care? The first few weeks were normal. Nathan worked late at the gas station, usually closing around 11 p.m. I'd go to bed before him, leaving our bedroom door unlocked so he could slip in without waking me. Simple enough. About a month after moving in, I woke up around midnight to Nathan jiggling the doorknob, then knocking. "Liv, the door's locked," he called. Half asleep, I stumbled to the door, confused because I knew I'd left it unlocked. The knob was indeed locked, one of those push-button locks you have to deliberately press. I opened it to find Nathan looking just as puzzled as I felt. "Did you lock it?" he asked. "No, I left it unlocked like always." We brushed it off as me being forgetful, but the next night it happened again. And the night after that. Every single night, I'd leave the door unlocked, and every night, Nathan would find it locked when he came to bed. I started to think I was losing my mind. I even sat up in bed some nights, watching the door, determined to catch myself if I was sleepwalking or something. But I'd fall asleep eventually, and still, Nathan would be locked out. Then one afternoon, when Nathan was working, I was in the shower. Over the sound of the water, I heard him call my name from the bedroom. "Olivia, where are you?" I quickly rinsed off, wrapped a towel around myself, and hurried out. "Nathan, I thought you were at work." The house was empty, completely empty. I checked every room, dripping water everywhere. I even looked outside and saw Nathan through the window of the gas station helping a customer. There was no way he had called me and then sprinted back to work without me noticing. When I told him about it that night, he laughed it off. Old houses make weird noises. You probably just heard the pipes. But it wasn't the pipes. It happened again and again. I'd hear my name being called while I was alone, or I'd feel the mattress sink beside me when I was reading in bed, as if someone had sat down. Once, I even felt fingers brush through my hair while I was falling asleep. I jerk awake, heart pounding, to find myself alone in the room. The bathroom was the worst. Multiple times while showering, I'd hear knocking on the door. Not Nathan's usual 2 quick knocks, but slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. The first few times I'd call out, just a minute, thinking it was Nathan. But when I'd open the door, no one would be there. After a while, I started showering with the door open, even though it made me feel exposed and vulnerable. I didn't tell Nathan everything because I didn't want to sound crazy. He was working so hard at the gas station, and I didn't want to add to his stress. But things were escalating, and I was spending more time alone in that house than I was comfortable with. Then Nathan got deployed. He's in the reserves, and his unit was called up for a 6-month tour overseas. Suddenly, I was completely alone in the house. The first few weeks after he left were the hardest. I missed him terribly, and the house felt even more oppressive without him. Communication was spotty. Sometimes I'd go days without hearing from him, and the loneliness was crushing. About a month into his deployment, I was sitting in the living room one evening. It was early December, and I'd put up a small Christmas tree, trying to make the house feel less empty. I was nursing a glass of wine, feeling sorry for myself because I hadn't heard from Nathan in 3 days. I remember letting a tear slip down my cheek, thinking about spending Christmas alone. That's when it happened. One of the glass ornaments on the tree, the simple blue sphere, detached from its branch. Instead of falling straight down and shattering, as it should have, it dropped gently to the hardwood floor with a soft tap. Then, impossibly, it began to roll toward me. I froze, watching as it rolled across the floor, then over the thick area rug where it should have stopped, but it didn't. It continued rolling until it came to rest right at my feet. I stared at it for a long time, trying to rationalize what I'd just seen. There was no draft, no slope in the floor that would cause this, and the ornament crossing the rug was physically impossible. With shaking hands, I picked it up. It was cool to the touch and completely intact, not even a crack. As I held it, I had the strangest feeling that it was a gift, something meant to cheer me up. That night, for the first time since moving into the house, I didn't feel afraid. Instead, I felt watched over. The thought disturbed me as much as it comforted me. The gift continued. I'd come home to find a wildflower placed on my pillow, though no wildflowers grew near our house. My favorite mug, which I could have sworn I'd left in the sink, will be waiting on the counter in the morning, clean and ready for coffee. Little things that made me feel less alone. Then I found a card. It was a playing card, the Queen of Spades, but not from any modern deck. The edges were torn, the paper yellowed with age. The first time I found it, it was on my nightstand. I assumed Nathan had left it there before he deployed, though I couldn't imagine why. I tossed it in the trash. The next day, I found the same card on the windowsill in the kitchen. I recognized the distinctive tear along one edge. This time, I examined it more closely. The card looked ancient, with a pattern on the back I didn't recognize. Again, I threw it away. It reappeared in the bathroom 2 days later. Over the next few weeks, I found that card everywhere, tucked in my book, on the dashboard of my car, under my pillow. Each time, I'd throw it away, and each time, it would return. I started taking photos of it in different locations, partly to convince myself I wasn't crazy, partly to show Nathan when he came home. When Nathan finally returned from his deployment, I was beyond relieved. The night he came home, I broke down and told him everything. The locked doors, the voices, the gifts, and the card. He was skeptical, of course, but even he couldn't explain the locked doors he'd experienced himself. When I showed him the photos of the card in different locations, he seemed troubled. "Look, Liv," he said, "there's got to be a logical explanation. Maybe the card is falling out of somewhere when you move things around." The next morning, as if on cue, the Queen of Spades was on the kitchen table. I showed it to Nathan, who frowned and snatched it up. "Enough of this," he said, and marched outside. I followed him as he walked to the trash bin at the side of the house, tore the card into pieces, and buried them deep in the garbage. "There," he said, putting an arm around me. "No more ghost stories." But the atmosphere in the house had changed. The presence I'd felt, the one that had seemed to be keeping me company while Nathan was gone, now felt angry. The temperature in rooms would drop suddenly. Doors would slam without any breeze. Once, all the cabinet doors in the kitchen flew open at once while Nathan and I were eating dinner. Nathan couldn't deny these things were happening, but he refused to consider anything supernatural. "It's an old house," he'd say. "Bad wiring, uneven settling." Then came the incident in the bathtub. I was taking a bath one evening while Nathan was at the gas station. I'd been soaking for maybe 20 minutes when I felt the water ripple. At first, I thought I'd moved, but then I realized I was completely still. The ripples were coming from the other end of the tub. Then I felt it, a pressure on my chest, as if someone was pressing down on me. I tried to sit up, but I couldn't move. The pressure increased, pushing me deeper into the water until it was lapping at my chin, my lips. That's when I sensed her, more than saw her, a woman pressing down on me with both hands, her face twisted in hatred. I couldn't make out features, just a dark shape and those hands pressing. I tried to scream but couldn't get enough air. The water was at my nose now. I thrashed, finally breaking free enough to sit up with a splash. Water went everywhere, and I scrambled out of the tub, slipping on the tile floor and bruising my hip badly as I fell. I ran from the bathroom in just my towel and didn't go back in until Nathan came home that night. As we lay in bed with all the lights on, I told him we needed to move. For the first time, he didn't argue. We put the house on the market the next day, disclosing only what we legally had to. It sold quickly to another couple excited about the gas station business. We moved across the country, wanting to put as much distance between us and Penn Haven as possible. Before we left, I did some research on the house's history. The previous owner had been a woman named Elena Simmons. She'd lived there alone for 30 years after her husband died. Neighbors described her as a recluse who became increasingly unstable over the years. She was a hoarder who filled the house with junk, and there were rumors she abused animals. The house had to be completely gutted and renovated before it could be sold after she died. No one would tell me if she died in the house, but based on how the locals changed the subject whenever her name came up, I think she did. I don't know if what we experienced was Elena or something else that attached itself to that place, but I've never felt such unhappiness emanating from anything before or since. It was like being in the presence of decades of accumulated misery and rage. We've been in our new home for 3 years now. No locked doors, no disembodied voices, no mysteriously appearing objects. But sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I feel the mattress sink beside me. And sometimes, when I'm in the shower, I think I hear knocking. I never found the Queen of Spades again, but sometimes I wonder if she's waiting for me somewhere. Her torn edges and faded face are a reminder that some things don't stay buried. I can't believe it's been over 40 years since that night, but the memory of it still makes my skin crawl. I was only 11 years old when it happened, living with my parents in Oak Valley. It was the summer of 1978, hot and sticky, the kind of summer that clung to your skin and made you long for a breeze. My dad's best friend, Carlton Hayes, had just died. I remember Carlton well, a big guy with a booming laugh who'd come over on weekends to watch baseball with my dad. They'd been friends since high school, and Carlton was like an uncle to me. He'd always bring me baseball cards or a handful of candy when he visited, his grin wide enough to light up the room. His death was sudden, a heart attack at only 42. It hit my dad hard. The funeral was on a Tuesday. I remember because I had to miss Little League practice, which felt like a big deal to my 11-year-old self. It was my first real funeral, and everything about it felt wrong. The way everyone whispered instead of talking normally, the strange, sweet smell that hung in the air of the funeral home, the way Carlton looked in the casket. He was like himself, but not really, like a wax figure version of the man I knew. My dad, Richard, was one of the pallbearers. I'd never seen him cry before that day, but he did when they lowered the casket into the ground, his shoulders shaking as he stood in the line of somber men. My mom kept her arm around him the whole time, her face tight with worry. The burial was quick because a storm was moving in, dark clouds rolling across the sky, the air heavy with a promise of rain. By the time we got home, the first drops were already falling, pattering against the car windows. That night, the storm turned violent. I fell asleep to the sound of rain hammering against my bedroom window, the wind rattling the glass in its frame. Sometime in the middle of the night, a massive thunderclap woke me up. It was so loud it seemed to shake the whole house, the kind of sound that makes your bones vibrate. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart racing, the room lit briefly by a flash of lightning. My digital alarm clock glowed red, 3:02 a.m. I needed to use the bathroom, which was at the end of the hall, past my parents' bedroom. Our house was an old ranch style, built in the 50s, with creaky floorboards that seemed extra loud in the middle of the night, especially during a storm. I tiptoed down the hallway, trying to be quiet so I wouldn't wake my parents, my bare feet cold against the worn wood. The storm was still raging outside, lightning flashing through the hallway window, casting weird, elongated shadows on the wall that made the familiar space feel alien. I hurried into the bathroom and did my business as quickly as possible, the unease of being up alone in the middle of a storm settling into my bones. It was like I wasn't supposed to be witnessing the world in this state, dark, wild, and untamed. Just as I was leaving the bathroom, I heard the phone ring. This was 1978, so we just had the one house phone mounted on the kitchen wall with an extension in my parents' bedroom. The ring sounded impossibly loud in the quiet house, cutting through the background noise of the storm like a knife. It rang 3 times before I heard my dad's voice, groggy with sleep, answer it. I stood frozen in the hallway, wondering who would call at such an hour. Back then, a middle-of-the-night phone call usually meant bad news, someone in the hospital, or worse. I couldn't hear what my dad was saying clearly, just the low murmur of his voice from behind the closed bedroom door. I probably should have gone back to bed, but something kept me standing there in the dark hallway, listening, my hand hovering near the wall for balance. After what seemed like forever but was probably only a minute or two, I heard my dad's voice rise suddenly. Not quite a shout, but definitely alarmed. "Carlton?" I heard him say clearly, "This isn't funny." "Who is this?" My blood went cold. Carlton? But Carlton was dead. We'd buried him that very day. I'd seen it with my own eyes. The casket lowered into the ground, the dirt piled on top. More silence followed. Then my dad again, his voice shaky in a way I'd never heard before. "That's impossible." "You're not. You can't be." I was scared now, really scared. I wanted to push open the door, to run to my mom for comfort, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, my hand on the doorknob, listening. "Where are you?" My dad's voice came again, trembling. "The cemetery?" "But you can't be." Lightning flashed again, illuminating the hallway in stark white light, and in that instant, I swear I saw a shadow that wasn't mine stretching across the wall, a tall, indistinct shape that seemed to loom for a moment before vanishing. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest, but there was nothing there, just the empty hallway and the sound of rain pounding outside. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran back to my room, diving under the covers like I used to do when I was little, and thought monsters were after me. I pulled the blankets up over my head and lay there, shaking, straining to hear any more of the conversation. But all I could make out was the storm and my own frantic heartbeat. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep, exhaustion overtaking fear. When I woke up the next morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight streamed through my window, warm and golden, like nothing had happened. For a moment, I wondered if I'd dreamed the whole thing, the phone call, my dad saying Carlton's name. But then I went to the kitchen and saw my dad. He was sitting at the table, still in his pajamas, staring into a cup of coffee that looked like it had gone cold. His face was gray, with dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept at all. My mom was at the stove, making pancakes, acting normal, but there was a tension in the air that even I could feel. "Morning sport," my dad said when he saw me, trying to sound normal, but not quite pulling it off. His voice had a strained quality, and his hands were shaking slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. "Morning," I replied, sliding into my usual chair. I wanted to ask about the phone call, but something stopped me. Maybe the look on his face, or maybe I was afraid of what he might tell me. We ate breakfast mostly in silence, my mom giving my dad worried looks, but not saying anything. After we finished, she went to take a shower, leaving just me and my dad at the table. Once she was gone, I finally worked up the courage to ask, "Dad, who called last night?" He looked at me sharply. "You heard the phone?" I nodded. It woke me up. I was in the hallway, coming back from the bathroom. My dad's face went even paler. He set down his coffee cup with a shaky hand. "Did you hear any of the conversation?" I hesitated, then admitted, "I heard you say Carlton's name." He was quiet for a long time, just staring at the tabletop like he was seeing something else entirely, a memory or a nightmare. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Tommy, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound crazy. I don't even know if I believe it myself." He took a deep breath, then continued. "Last night I got a call. The person on the other end, they said they were Carlton. A chill ran down my spine. But Carlton's dead," I said, my voice small. "Yes," my dad nodded, his eyes distant. "We buried him yesterday." "I know that. But this voice, Tommy, it sounded exactly like him. Not like someone doing an impression, but him. And he was terrified." My dad's eyes were wide now, reliving the memory. He said he'd woken up in darkness, that he couldn't move his arms or legs much, that he realized he was in a coffin. He kept saying he'd been buried alive and needed help. I felt sick to my stomach, the pancakes I'd just eaten churning unpleasantly. "What did you do?" He swallowed hard, his hands shaking so badly now that he clasped them together to steady them. He was begging me to come to the cemetery, to bring shovels to dig him up before. My dad trailed off, his voice breaking. Before it was too late. He kept saying, "Hurry, Rich, please hurry, I don't have much time." My dad's hands were trembling visibly now, the coffee cup forgotten. I told him it wasn't possible, that I'd seen him dead, that we buried him. But he just kept begging, saying he was running out of air, that he was cold and scared and alone in the dark. "Did you go?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. My dad hadn't left the house last night. He shook his head, looking ashamed. I couldn't. I was terrified, Tommy. Not just of the idea of digging up a grave in the middle of the night. I was afraid of what I might find. What if it really was Carlton? What if something else, was using his voice to lure me out there? I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but the fear in his voice was real enough. The call ended suddenly, just cut off mid-sentence. He was saying, "Please, Rich, I'm running out of," and then nothing. I tried calling the operator to trace the call, but they said it came from an unidentified number. My dad looked at me directly now, his eyes haunted. The worst part, Tommy, is that when I finally try to go back to sleep, every time I close my eyes, I imagine Carlton clawing at the inside of his coffin. And then I'd imagine him somehow getting out, finding his way here, coming for me, because I didn't help him. He glanced toward the hallway closet, his expression genuinely fearful. I kept thinking he'd be in the closet or under the bed, like in those stupid scary stories we used to tell each other as kids. I know how crazy that sounds, but I couldn't shake it. We both jumped when my mom came back into the kitchen, her hair still damp from the shower. She looked between us, clearly sensing something was off. "Everything okay?" "Fine," my dad said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just guy talk, right, Tommy?" I nodded, playing along, but from that moment on, something had changed between me and my dad. We shared this secret, this impossible, terrifying experience that neither of us could explain. The days that followed were strange. My dad called Carlton's widow Mary, making up some excuse about wanting to check on her, but I knew he was really fishing for information. Had the cemetery called? Had there been any disturbances at the grave? Of course not. Everything was normal, except for us. My dad never visited Carlton's grave, not once in all the years that followed. When Mary would invite us to memorial services or to put flowers on the grave on Carlton's birthday, my dad always made excuses. He couldn't bring himself to go anywhere near that cemetery. Sometimes late at night, I find him sitting in the living room with all the lights on, just staring at the phone, waiting. But it never rang again, not like that. What makes this whole thing so impossible to dismiss, even after all these years, is that I heard the phone ring too. This wasn't just my dad's nightmare or hallucination. That phone really rang at 3 a.m. during a thunderstorm, the night after we buried Carlton Hayes. Was it really Carlton, somehow conscious in his grave, making one desperate call for help? Was it some cruel prankster who happened to sound exactly like him? Or was it something else entirely? Something trying to lure my dad out to a cemetery in the middle of a stormy night for purposes I don't even want to contemplate. I don't have answers. Neither did my dad, who passed away 5 years ago. On his deathbed, feverish and confused, he kept looking at the hospital room closet and mumbling, "I'm sorry, Carlton." I was afraid. I still live in Oak Valley. Sometimes I drive past that cemetery and look at it through the wrought iron gates, wondering. I've never gone in like father, like son, I guess. Some fears get passed down, even when we don't understand them. Whatever called our house that night, whatever used Carlton's voice to plead for help, it left a mark on our family that never fully faded. And even now, 4 decades later, I still can't bring myself to answer phone calls after midnight.